A long time ago there lived a man in whom golden blood flowed, and this blood had the power to protect the inhabitants of that land. This man lived and fell into eternal sleep in the river Cherry, and this river flows through the city of the young lady. And since the golden blood still remains in the water, gold is still found in the river, and this is the legend of the founding Roymonda. This proud golden state, due to the abuse of power by ruler Lespel, lost his capital and kingdom during the Chervitz War and was completely defeated. Now the main character is heading across the field and realizes that she needs to survive. The girl's name is Zelane, and she is the 8th princess of the kingdom of Roymond. In total, Raymond's royal family had 11 heirs, including her. And in order to guarantee a good future, the heirs need to survive, because even if half of them die, the rest will survive and revive the kingdom, especially those who received a royal education, and one of the sisters of the young lady who received it is called Lynn Bessie, and she is the first princess. The second princess, whose name is Demiella, also received a royal education, and so that they could build a state on the ruins, she and her 3 brothers were sacrificed to the great goal. Now, one of the knights catches up with the princess and screams for her to be careful, but suddenly he falls from his horse, and the young lady realizes that it is almost the end. However, the girl, trying to escape from all the arrows aimed at her, realizes that she still wants to live. However, then one of the arrows hits her horse, after which it falls to the ground, and the main character also falls. However, despite all her wounds gritting her teeth, she understands that she needs to get up. With a purposeful look, she understands that she must survive, but then one of the arrows crashes into the ground in front of her, making the girl almost cry. She realizes that she grew up fending for herself for 22 years among her brothers and sisters, so she wonders how she can fall into eternal sleep like that. The girl then realizes that she needs to get up and escape. Then someone is already throwing a bag over the young lady's head. And with her last effort, she tries to break free and realizes that she wants to live, but it turns out it's too late. But a little later, the girl already sees 2 birds in front of her and thinks how long she slept. And more precisely, how long she was unconscious, because all she remembers is how they grabbed her and threw her somewhere. But in any case, now I'm better. Looking at the iron cage, she realizes that she is breathing fresh air and that it is warm and sunny there. However, then the lady realizes that she is most likely in a dungeon, but it's strange because where such dungeons are located and what will happen if she escapes. The girl then thinks whether she is in the forest, but she has no idea how to escape from there. But she does not think that she is still the territory of her kingdom, which means it will be difficult to find her. However, then the main character realizes that she is standing on a log and thinks that she is about to fall. However, then she stands on this stick and wonders if she is still sleeping. But when the girl wants to rub her eyes, she realizes that she can't even looking at her hands. She sees that now, instead of them, there are wings, so the girl immediately thinks in shock what kind of species this is. After which she almost faints from surprise and screams that she is now a bird. The girl then realizes that she can use her wings and tries to get free. Then she drinks a little water from the bowl and thinks how good it is. However, the girl then thinks in shock what she is doing now. And after that, she remembers that she is now a bird. Then the young lady wonders if this is a dream, and then bites her wing. However, this only hurts her, and the young lady screams, realizing that this is not a dream. After which, she remembers her past life and asks to return to it. However, then someone takes her by the wings, which makes the bird a little surprised and wonders what happened this time. It turns out to be a knight, and he asks what's wrong with this bird, but the girl is only surprised and wonders if it's a person. The knight just looks at the bird and asks if it hurts somewhere because it needs to be reported. The girl then believes that she is not this knight's bird because he will tell someone about her. And in this case, the young lady decides to pretend that she is about to fall into eternal sleep, after which she weakens and falls to the bottom of the cage. The knight then asks in shock what is wrong with her, and the girl realizes that this is a chance, and when he brings his hand closer to her. Then the bird uses its claws and wounds the knight, after which it immediately flies away from the cage. The knight then tries to catch her, but it is too late because the bird is already soaring in the air. The main character, looking at all the beauty underneath, understands that the escape was successful and she was able to do it. The girl then thinks how the little man tasted her claws and laughs evilly. However, the young lady realizes that although she is also a human, she then flies up to one of the branches, and he immediately sits on it. There is also a squirrel that drops its nut out of fear. However then, under the weight of the bird's body, the branch breaks, and the main character falls to the floor. The squirrel, seeing this, mocks her, and the main character then looks at her angrily and asks in her thoughts what she was staring at. The squirrel almost faints from this because he's very afraid and then immediately runs away. And the main character realizes that she is now a bird of prey, after which she wonders where her mirror is. However, at the same moment the girl realizes that she is not wearing anything. Except for the feathers, she completely forgot about it. Now the young lady realizes that she needs to look for a body of water. However, then she sees a yellow cloth and wonders if this is the flag of the Reborn kingdom. Well, when the girl looks at who is holding this flag, she sees that there is a knight who is not moving. And the main character then wonders if he has really fallen into eternal sleep. The girl realizes that the man with the flag must have been a soldier messenger, after which she sits on his shoulder and understands that if this was the case, he should have returned to the Allied camp. The young lady also understands that she must find out what happened to her country and body. However, when the girl already reaches into the knight's pocket and takes out a scroll from there, then he suddenly realizes that his heart is still beating, and the girl realizes that this guy is seriously injured, and if you leave him there, he will die. However, the girl understands that she will not let this happen, and since the castle was captured, the girl wonders whether it is possible to believe that Royman's army still exists. But then she flies anyway and realizes that it's worth trying to find them because she always recognizes this yellow flag, because she is Princess Roymanda. Then the girl sees some kind of camp, and when she realizes that there is a yellow ensign there, she understands that the army is still there, after which she realizes that she needs to save the soldier and flies up to one of the knights. However, when the girl is still flying into him, she does not understand how she can stop. And with tears in her eyes, she flies into him and apologizes in her thoughts because she didn't do it on purpose. However, the man then grabs her by the neck. Then, with disgust, he asks what it is and whether their animal enemies use them to plunge other people into eternal sleep. The girl then realizes that she cannot breathe and thinks that she hardly found him in the Allied camp, but this is too much because she is a princess. At this time, the knight runs up to this man and turns to him, after which he screams for him to wait. Valhal then asks what it is, and the knight states that this falcon carrier belongs to their camp. The man claims that this bird tried to attack him. The knight then asks for forgiveness, but then he thinks why, of all people, it was he who had to be attacked. After which he says that he has no idea why this bird behaved this way, but a few hours ago they received reports of an escaped falcon. The man then only looks at the bird coldly, and the main character gets angry and tries to tell the creature to let her in, but all she can get is the sounds that the bird makes. And the man then claims that this bird was definitely aiming at him, and if he had not caught it, he would have remained healthy in his neck. After which he wraps this bird, and the letter in his paw says that this is really their bird. The knight, carrying this letter, is also surprised, and the brunette then takes out a scroll of paper and says that this is a confidential message. After which he turns to Sir Luke and tells him to check whether the camp near the 4th line has received messages, to which he agrees. And after that the man still says that the knight should invite the person responsible for the bird. The main character almost loses consciousness at this time because the blood rushes to her head. The girl then thinks why she flew to a man with power. Well, then the young lady realizes that this is the commander. She understands that the Queen's army is the strongest of the 3 branches of the royal troops, and is called the Rohenheim. There was an agreement that the commander of Rohenheim would lead all branches of the army in wartime, and it turns out this man is Lumaris Valhal, and the reason she is still alive in this situation is because she is pretending to be sick. The man, looking at the bird in his hands, only remains silent, and then begins to touch it by the wings and says that this is suspicious. At this time, one of the knights immediately runs up to the commander-in-chief and says that he arrived as soon as he could, and then asks what happened. But he only tells the guy to look at the bird and asks if he is sure that it escaped from their camp. The knight then takes the bird in his hands and says that this is the same bird that escaped from the cage a few hours ago, and it has been squeaking since the morning, so he decided to look at what was wrong. But at that very moment the falcon flew out of the cage. Zelaine then realizes that this is the same soldier she grabbed. And the man with black hair then puts his hand on his forehead and says that they have almost no messenger birds left, and he allowed this to happen. The knight immediately cries out, asking for forgiveness, and the commander then says that this falcon flew at him out of nowhere, and it seemed as if he was trying to hit him in the neck or even in the heart. but he didn't get hit because he grabbed it before Togo. But this bird is definitely dangerous. After which he asks if falcons usually behave this way, and the knight says that he is afraid not. And birds have a natural instinct to avoid everything during flight. And the commander then asks if it is possible that some enemy trained her to attack him, and the knight then screams that this is impossible, and he believes that this bird was not skillful enough because it had not yet matured properly. Zelaine then rejoices and realizes that the knight has done an excellent job. And the commander then only coldly says that previously the bird flew perfectly. The knight says that she flew normally, but she has not yet learned to land, and she needs to train more to carry out important missions. So it was probably her first time flying outside the site, and it's surprising that she was able to return back at all. The commander then asks if the knight is saying that it is just an accident, and he replies that he thinks so. After which the commander says that he can be free, and the main character is happy because she understands that she was able to survive. But the next moment the commander tells the knight to leave the bird and leave, which makes the main character seem to crumble. The commander claims that this bird brought a confidential message and he needs to read it, so let the knights leave the bird. The guy then says that the birds obviously don't say hello, and the man only coldly says that she is still alive. After which the knight immediately agrees. The commander says that this is great and then orders the bird to be tied so that it does not fly away. And a little time later, the main character is already sitting tied up and chained to the ground near the commander's tent. However, then she sees the one from the very night who saved her. The girl then looks at him, and he realizes that she is in his debt, and the knight then only thinks why this bird is there. After which he enters the tent and turns to Sir Valhal and says that they still have not received news from the camp. And they should have arrived by now, so maybe something happened. The man says that if they encountered an enemy, then the message had to be delivered by a person. And then he does not understand why their own bird appeared to them in the end. The man claims that an untrained bird would not be able to distinguish an ally from an enemy. And the knight then claims that perhaps the messenger from the 4th detachment sent a bird in his place. The commander says that if so, this may be unreliable information, and the enemies must have captured their envoy and tortured him so that he would bite the information and add incorrect data. The knight then asks what the commander was thinking about and whether he received the secret letter. The man looks at the burnt paper and they answer that, yes, but there was not a word about salvation. And if they had problems escaping, they would definitely have left the saving symbol falcon with the residents. Well, he doesn't think that the message is the work of the enemy. However, if this is the case, they return to the starting point again. After all, how did an untrained bird manage to deliver information, but their messenger got lost and all this is too strange to be a coincidence? The knight then asks what he assumes then. But suddenly a bird on the street screams loudly, which scares the knight. After which he goes outside and the main character begins to gesture something. Zelaine spins around and then falls, and the knight then immediately enters the tent and cries out to Sir Valhal. And the young lady then thinks if he really understood. After which she thinks that he should report that their messenger is lying in the forest. The knight claims that he examined the bird, and the commander asks if it is wounded somewhere. The knight then says that it doesn't seem like it, and Zelaine is happy, but now he will tell about the knights in the forest. However, the guy then says that it seems like the bird is mad, and he is even sure of this, which is why the main character comes into shock and thinks what he said. She immediately begins to scream until the commander comes outside, and when he does so, then the bird once again shows the gesture that it showed to the knight, and she herself thinks that she is still the princess of this country and will soon go completely crazy. However, the girl understands that someone else's life is at stake. The man then looks at the bird, but only lying down looks at him in response with a confident look. After which the commander turns to Sir Luke and says that they cannot be sure, so let him send someone to search for the messenger, but let him not go far from the camp area. The knight then asks what the commander is talking about, but he just looks at him coldly and orders him to go and look, to which the knight agrees. And the main character then rejoices because this messenger will finally be found and thinks that the commander is great and did a great job. However, when the man enters his tent, he says that he is sure that not all of these birds are at home. Zelaine then thinks in shock how he dared to call her crazy because she gave him information. But the girl then understands that she needs to calm down because it's hard to admit. But she's a bird now, but she won't benefit from her madness. The girl doesn't want to be thrown out into the wild because of suspicions of her sanity, because she doesn't even know how to hunt. Therefore, the young lady understands that she will not think about it for now. However, when she was a princess, she couldn't do what she wanted, but now, being a bird, she has the opportunity to express her emotions and just lie around. A little time later, one of the knights approaches the tent, after which he goes to the bird and asks if it is hungry. If so, let it eat. The young lady then opens her eyes and thinks they brought food to the vine, but she believes that now is the time to have a snack. However, when they present her with 2 mice, the young lady just screams and thinks what it is. The knight then asks if she likes it, but this is strange because she usually eats them with pleasure. The main character then thinks that, of course, she doesn't like it because she is a human, and in her thoughts asks the knight to remove this muck, after which he brings something else and asks if she might want it. But when the main character looks at what he has in his hands, she sees that there are 2 frogs and once again screams asking Togo to put it away. The knight then realizes in bewilderment that the falcon's children are eating frogs, after which he goes into Sir Valhal's tent. Well, he just tells the guy not to start a circus. He then asks what he is talking about, because he just wanted to feed the bird. However, when the commander looks at him with disgust, he screams that he understands. And the man then says that if the bird does not want to eat on its own, then let him force feed it because it will be a hassle. But if the bird dies before they figure everything out, however, the knight asks how one can feed an animal that does not want to eat. The commander claims that refusal to eat is a sign of madness, and the main character becomes even more angry with him. The man then asks how the reconnaissance is going, and the knight says that only 2 members of the reconnaissance group have not returned. However, then someone runs into the tent and turns to the commander, after which he screams that they have found the messenger of the 4th Battalion. The knight then, in shock, asks where, and the man who ran in says that he was much closer than they thought, and was wounded, and they also moved them, and are providing assistance in the barracks. The knight also says that they are still advancing, and if the commander had not given the order to find the messengers, they might have lost them altogether. Another knight then turns to Sir Valhal and says that they have saved another resident of Roymond. The commander then says that the reconnaissance squad has done a good job and let them go and rest, after which he turns to Sir Luke and tells him to bring the tied bird to him. When the main character is already near this man, she understands that she needs to look like a cute little bird. But she is tormented by doubts about the reasons why he ordered her to be brought there. And after all, the girl can only think about violence against animals. However, she doesn't understand why she became a bird, and we don't know why she doesn't know what happened to her body, and she still doesn't remember her descent into eternal sleep. The girl then, with eyes full of determination, understands that they need to find out that since she is in the Allied zone, they must know what happened, and perhaps the information is in secret documents, and there they can look at the situation with Roymond, as well as the fate of her brothers. However, the girl, lying on the ground, does not understand how she can find out. But then someone tells the commander that his lunch has arrived, and the main character understands that this is human food, after which he begins to squeak to the men and then says that he thought the bird was not hungry, but now everything is clearly different. So he brings the young lady a plate of mice and toads and tells her to eat. However, Zelaine only throws this plate away with all his might. But then the girl notices the commander's cold gaze on her and gets very scared. She remembers how she was a little smaller, and when she did something wrong, they beat her. Therefore, even now the young lady understands that she will most likely be removed and then closes her eyes a little. However, the commander is only the eldest. If the bird does not eat it, then what? It is the girl who then points at his food or thinks in her mind that she wants that thing. And the man then says that most likely she does not understand what he is talking about, and the young lady only points more aggressively at his food, after which the commander orders to call the person in charge of the bird. The main character understands that before she is locked in a cage, she needs to get acquainted with the information to find out what happened to the kingdom. The man then unties the bird and asks what it is looking for and whether it is looking at food. The main character, as soon as she is untied, immediately runs to the table and realizes that now is the time, and the man understands that everything is as he thought. After which he takes the bread in his hands and crumbles a little to the bird, and it begins to eat. Well, then the girl begins to rummage through the papers and wonders where the secret information is. However, the man only holds a roll of paper in his hands and asks if the bird is looking for it. Zelane then realizes that this is exactly what she needs, after which she jumps on the commander, and in her thoughts tells him to give it back. However, the man only hides that scroll and claims that he was wondering what she was looking for. The main character then gets angry and realizes that she brought him this package, and this is how he repaid them for their kindness. However, the commander then only takes a piece of meat and throws it to the bird. The young lady, looking at the chicken, wonders whether he has decided that he will pay off her anger with food and swears that she will not eat a crumb. However, a little later she is already eating this piece of meat with all her might and thinks that it is too tasty. The commander just tells her to eat slowly and says whatever it is that is so obsessed. The main character then thinks what it means to be possessed, and she's just embarrassed that she has to eat this way in front of a stranger. But now she is a bird, not a princess, and the girl wonders if she has become obsessed with him after she ate just a little bit. The young lady thinks how offended she is, and the man then just pats her on the head and says that a frantic attempt to get to confidential information is not what should be inherent in her. And if the bird has already delivered the letter, then let it forget about it. The main character then thinks that he is now talking about the nature of birds and believe that there are so many crazy people in the world. But she even sympathizes with the people who are forced to serve him, and her second sister, who is engaged to him. The commander now says that the more she is fixated on confidential information, the more useless it is as they are driven, but after that the girl just screams, after which she thinks that this is not an obsession and draws something on the table, but the man only asks what it is. Then the young lady thinks how ashamed she is, and if only she had teeth, she would have bitten him to death. At this time, a knight with blonde hair says that he has brought a soldier, and when he enters the tent, he asks if the commander called him. The man turns to him and asks how long this bird needs to be trained before it becomes useful. Knight claims that this usually takes from 15 days to a month, but it all depends on the specific bird. The commander then says that it's clear that at least the birds haven't finished eating them, but let him take her and start training her. After all, now he doesn't think that this bird is normal. Then, a little puzzled, she asks if the commander gave the poultry fried meat, and he asks if it was possible. King Rai then says that it is possible, but usually they prefer raw meat, and the very fact that Falcon eats fried meat is amazing. The main character then thinks that she likes fried meat, and the commander says that she is very picky for poultry. The man then remembers how the bird showed him that the messenger was wounded in the forest, after which she rejoiced when he understood, and now the commander-in-chief asks if it is possible that the bird understands human speech, or that it can explain something, and that the two knights are shocked. One of them then asks if Sir has also gone crazy, but when he sees the commander's cold gaze, he immediately turns around, and on the other hand, the knight says that birds cannot understand speech or explain something. After all, this is possible only after training, and then only with simple commands. The commander then looks at the bird and says that he understands, and the knight then takes the falcon. Zelane then looks at the commander and thinks that she will read the message no matter what. The other knight then says that he will go too, with the commander still keeping intense eye contact with the bird. However, Sir Luke then turns to the commander and asks if he spoke to anyone. The man then asks what the knight is talking about, and he says that he heard something before he came in. The commander says that there was no one in the barracks and he must have heard it. However, the knight then claims that he definitely heard something like the fact that the messenger is useless if he wants to get confidential information. The man then remembers how he talked to the bird but claims that he was talking to himself. And the knight, when he leaves the tent, thinks that maybe the commander is really tired, and a man, when he is alone, just sighs. After which he leans on his hand and realizes that he was chatting with the bird. And he also thinks that he was really overwhelmed with too many things to do, but he understands that fatigue is just an excuse, after which he sweeps away the crumbs. But he remembers the bird's furious look and understands that it strangely worries him. The next day, the knights are training, and one of them says that they heard that they had found messengers, and another asks if they will have to change their position and the location of the royal family again. The main character is training at this time, and the knight says that she is doing well, after which he orders the bird to bring a stick that is nearby. The main character then thinks with a piece of meat in her mouth how many there were, and she told him that she understood speech. The knight then just smiles and tells the bird that it's good, and let her eat it and cheer up. And the main character thinks that at least Sir Valhal, or whatever his name was, seemed to understand her, and the girl even misses him. The young lady realizes that with the information she collected there over the course of 4 days, she found out that even during Gran's persecution, the Ronamas were still looking for something. And maybe this is something for the royal Raymond family, but someone has to be alive, because Roenheim would never have continued to fight in such a grueling battle if not for this. Because one of the royals of Roenheim is looking for something, and the girl hopes that she will find out what exactly they are looking for. A short time later, the commander is already approaching the bird, and the main character is a little surprised. And he just puts his hand on her cheek and says that the bird is dirty. The main character is then in shock, wondering if this is all he will say after he hasn't seen her for 5 days, or if she also wants to wash herself. The knight then says that he will wash the bird for her. They were busy moving, so he did not have time to put the bird in order, after which the commander orders the bird to be washed right now, and the main character wonders if it is really that dirty. The commander then claims that most of the messenger birds that they released never returned and now only one remains. The knight then asks if the commander means the 5 that Lope sent, and the man replies that yes, only one of the 5 returned, and that one was wounded, so most likely she is now somewhere in the barracks. The main character is then surprised and understands that the Lope were noble in the army faction, so it means that not only Roenheim remained. During the war, the leader of Roenheim became commander-in-chief, and Lope's army most likely obeys the orders of Valhal. The knight then says that the birds can bathe themselves, and he will leave the bath here, and the commander says that he needs to save the returning bird, so let him go, to which he agrees. The main character then thinks that the strong birds have not returned, and the commander compliments her thoughts and says that it means Grana was poisoned somewhere along the way, and if it weren't for this bird, they would have had a hard time. The main character then thinks that despite the fact that the man speaks with the same tone and facial expression as usual, he says that she was helpful. A short time later, Luke enters the tent and reports this to Sir. However, then he sees that very bird and asks what it is doing there, and the main character then considers that she was useful. The man claims that he is going to send the bird to Lope, and after that the knight, together with the main character, think about why he decided to do this. The knight then says that the bird most likely has not completed its training yet, and the man says that he was told the same thing, and he heard that she was only taught to fly from one flag to another. But in this case, she asks for a return, does not mean that it is too early to send her somewhere, and why the commander came to such a decision. The man claims that Grana is on the way to Lope's position, and sending a messenger there now is risky. And since he cannot sacrifice human life, he will have to send the bird. The knight says that he understands, and then asks what message the commander wants to deliver. And the man then says that there is something, and the main character understands that it is so secret that he didn't even tell Sir Luke what it was about. Hey, the girl thinks, is it really that important? After which she thinks that, if so, it is possible that she will be able to find out the fate of her relatives. I, the girl, must successfully complete the mission and deliver the letter to Lope. The commander then turns to the bird, and it looks at him resolutely and understands that it simply must do this. But the man then asks if this bird can cope, and the main character jumps from place to place with the thought that she can. The knight, looking at the commander, says that they can send it, of course, but he doesn't think it will end well, and the bird's life may be in danger or the letter may be intercepted by the enemy. The main character then realizes that she is the princess of this kingdom and will take on this mission, after which he asks the commander to send it. And he then turns to Sir Luke and tells him to call the person responsible for this bird and also grab water from outside, to which the knight agrees. The man then turns to the bird and asks why it is angry, and the main character only with the help of her claw. She draws a circle on the ground, and the man looking at him asks if she says she can handle it. Well, after that, he puts his hand on his forehead and asks how a bird can communicate like that. The main character then only makes a sound and points to the card, and the man looks at her a little puzzled, after which the bird points to the circle. At this time, the knight enters the tent and says that he has brought the person responsible for the bird. The man then only turns to the knight and says that he wonders if it is possible to convince this bird to take a workaround. And the other knight says that he does not think that this is possible, and they do not know whether there are obstacles on the way. And birds always choose the straight and shortest path when they return home. The man then looks at the young lady and sees that she has drooped a little. But then he looks at the ring she drew and wonders if he imagined it. At this time, the knight apologizes and asks where the master is going to send the falcon. But if he gave him a few more days, he could teach him to avoid green flags. However, the commander then only coldly says that it's enough to talk about it, and then asks if he really doesn't need to take care of the wounded bird there and let him go and look after it, after which the knight agrees. But when he leaves, he only realizes with a downcast expression that it looks like he'll have to cross another bird off the list. The main character then splashes in the water and realizes that she has coped with her role perfectly, but after several days of observation, everyone began to treat her like a bird with little space, and it seems that only the commander-in-chief notices her human features, and then that means that if she stays close to him, she will be able to find out the current situation in Roymond, and also find out about her relatives. After all, if at least someone from the royal family remains, she hopes that it will be her older sister. After all, then the revival of the kingdom will take place with ease. The young lady's elder sister is the only royal to receive the favor of the queen, king, and other nobles. She will become the rightful heir to the throne once the war is over, and the colors on the flag reflect the central and eastern and western regions of Roymond, and also symbolize the three military forces defending the territories. These powers are Rohirrim, Lope, and Ryumu, and they are all under the control of one name. Linbesi first received powers from the Lope, a faction of aristocrats in the eastern region, and being the first daughter of an official wife, she had an original pedigree, which was highly valued by the nobility. Moreover, as a woman, she received recognition from the queen. Chervij took part in the war, and she, as the daughter of the second official wife, received the same treatment as her older sister. But as a princess with no real power, this only threatened her safety, and being between two sisters who were fighting for the throne, she could only stand on the sidelines so as not to lose her head, so she lived solely for the purpose of survival, not even trying to gain the favor of the aristocracy. Therefore, let it be her first sister who will remain alive to raise the kingdom from ruins, but for the sake of Roymond, she needs to find at least some information about her sister. When the knight announces that he will go, the main character realizes that this is her chance. After which she flies into the air and realizes that she must help the kingdom and will do everything, so the commander will only send her to eat. The man then claims that he will tell her where she needs to go, after which he tells the bird to listen carefully, and she agrees, and the man claims that he is not sure if she knows. But if she flies straight, she will simply be an easy prey, so after a short journey without turns, she needs to turn. The main character then agrees, and the man then claims that she will then see a yellow flag and then let her fly up to the tent and flap her wings. Then they will tie something to it, and the bird will return in a different way, but as he said, if it flies straight, it can fall into eternal sleep. Zelane then realizes that this is a very dangerous operation, but for the first time she can do something for the sake of the country. However, the commander then leans a little closer to her and asks if she understood exactly. This makes the young lady go crazy and wonders why he came so close. However, the man then unties the rope of his leg and tells the bird to come back alive. The young lady, looking at him, is a little surprised and realizes that she had never heard these words when she was a human, and she needs to come back alive at all costs. The commander now tells the bird to fly, and the main character only agrees, after which she understands that the place she is heading to is the Lopesh camp. She had never been near their territory before, but now she wants to get there more than anything else. The commander then turns around, but then clenches his fists and in his thoughts asks the bird to deliver a message. And even though she is just a bird, he also asks her to return alive. The main character now understands that her first sister, who actively supports the aristocratic faction, married a man from an influential family. The second sister, being part of the queen's faction, became engaged in Rohirrim. Therefore, the main character avoided Lopeshe, where there were supporters of the faction of aristocrats, and Rohirrim, who were supporters of the queen. Among the three children of the first queen, the first and second sister came from the same womb, and they were on one side while Zelane was on the other. The girl understands that she was not only on the other side from her older sisters, but also from the children of the second queen, as well as from the children of the last empress. The young lady had no choice, except for hiding from your brothers and sisters, trying not to be seen. The children of the second queen bet only on the nationalist faction of Ryuma, and they did not leave the rights of either the first or the second left, but only followed the king and supported the royal family. If the young lady's senior family had not made a deal with Viceroy Lope I, then Ryuma would have supported the fourth brother, who was among the governor's favorites. And the main character always held her breath and listened to the conversations that reached her while she was sitting on the floor of the palace. For example, about how most of the children born from the governor's mistress died, but more often about the affairs of their sisters. And despite the fact that she owes her survival to her older sister, it is worth thanking the fact that her mother's family did not have enough influence. And that is why the first sister did not see her as a threat. And most likely it was great luck. Now the main character understands that her wings are starting to get tired. But thinking about this, she remembered Sir Luke's family because it definitely belongs to the Rohanaim camp. However, suddenly the main character notices something flying at her and then realizes that it is an arrow. The girl understands that she can avoid them, but her wings still hurt, and she wonders whether it's worth flying higher. But then you won't hit her at the moment when she begins to prepare to rise higher. After which the young lady sees the trees and realizes that she should go there. Zelaine also realizes that she needs to survive and return alive, after which she flies through the trees. And a little while later, sitting on one of the branches, she realizes that she has come off. The girl's intuition always worked when she was in the palace, and this intuition that kept her for 22 years did not disappear after her rebirth into a bird. But she could foresee danger, but could not avoid it. So as soon as a person like Sir Valhal appeared on the horizon, she ran and hid as if her life depended on him. And the main character now understands that for the first time as a bird, she escaped danger. After which the main character takes off and heads to the stream. The girl realizes that she feels alive again, but she didn't even fly close to Gron's location, so she doesn't understand why she was attacked. But there is no point in doubting that she is one of her own, since the enemy does not use birds as donnets, but they attacked her from the territory that is still under the control of Rohenheim. The young lady then notices that they are fooling the wind and thinks that it is good that the people of Gron are so close to the borders. And most likely, this is the reason why Sir Valhal sent her, so they need to hurry. When the main character flies near a residential area, she sees that the knights are burning this village. Zelaine realizes that the inhabitants of the central and eastern regions are occupied by Gron's people and are devastated. Due to the brutality of the Gron, the military takes little and removes obstacles in favor of speed of movement. After defeating the Roymond kingdom, they retreated and continued their conquest of neighboring territories. And this is a blind victory just for the sake of killing the flag into the ground. The main character then thinks if this is the country that lost the eastern region and handed over the palace to these people, and is this really her homeland, the kingdom of Roymond? The girl understands that it is necessary to expel Gron from these lands, after which she turns to Sir Valhal and tells him to just watch how well she understood his instructions. The main character then flies around the enemy camp 4 days later. She is already returning to the commander, and he says that the bird has indeed returned. The main character, only dirty and exhausted, understands that she did it, and the man then looks under her wing and then takes out a note. The girl then thinks that he should untie it as quickly as possible and tell him what is there. Well, when the commander does this, he grabs the bird and it does not understand why he did this. When a man wants to push her into a cage, the bird screams, and in her thoughts she thinks that this creature will let her in, because she also wants to read. Zelaine then screams for him to open the door, but when the commander just leaves, she feels left out and understands that she should have opened it herself before arriving. The knight at this time turns to Sir Valhal and asks if this crazy bird has returned. The man then claims that a response has come from Lope and they need to get together, leaders of the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th squads. The main character then just screams, and the commander says that the guy should invite them, to which he agrees. A little time later, one of the knights already enters the room and says that he has brought a map, and the main character is still screaming at this time. The commander then says that he is afraid that the noisy bird might interfere with the meeting, and the main character wonders if he is really going to throw her out of there. And how dare he repay her service with such disdain? Zelaine also wonders if the whole problem is that she is not a human now, and does that really solve so much? The commander then tells the man to take the bird and leave it near his tent, to which the knight agrees. And when the young lady is carried away, she still maintains eye contact with Sir Valhal. A short time later, the young lady already finds herself on the street, and when the commanders enter their tent, one of them turns to the bird and asks if it was put outside, after which he says that it was probably because she made a fuss, The main character of this only gets angrier and screams at the knight. Here he is a little surprised, and then says that she, of course, is not herself, but still successfully delivered the message. After which he tells the bird to eat and gives it a worm, claiming that he got it especially for her. The main character then furiously realizes that these two are pissing her off and what kind of giant worm this is. The main character realizes a little later that she hasn't heard anything, but at least Sir Luke's voice can be clearly heard, but he doesn't say anything important. The captain now claims that this is obvious, and the main character thinks what Sir Valhal is talking about because he lowered his voice so low that nothing could be understood. The girl thinks that since she didn't get to the confidential documents, she should at least hear this conversation. The girl realizes that she was so angry that she didn't think ahead at all, and now sits there and doesn't hear anything, and if she had only screamed once, she could have stayed inside. Now the knight says that if they advance to the black protective wall, he will gain a geographical advantage. And the main character then understands that, of course, if they win back this wall, then the fighting spirit will instantly perk up. The Black Defense Wall is a long wall separating the central and eastern regions of Roymond. And although it was originally a white wall, it was charred during the Truemaid War to regain control of the eastern part of the country. And after the end of the war, the wall came under the protection of the forces of the central region, the best army of the kingdom, Rohenheim, because after that, no foreign force could get over the wall. Then Rohenheim received the title of Black Account, and the Black Defensive Wall became the front line. In this war, the enemy managed to break through, but if they push the enemy behind the wall, it will be their great advantage. But the yellow flag that flies on the charred walls of the city instills faith in Roymond's people, and for this, it is enough to simply return the walls under your control. But if only this loud-voiced Sir Luke was voicing something important, but he drowns out everyone with himself, and the girl would never have thought that one day she would so badly want to shut up one of the shadow elves. The knight then asks what it was, and the other asks what he is talking about. The guy then says that it's okay, and the main character understands that the Tenniel family is one of the key figures in Rohenheim that supports the current queen. And for generations they were associated with the Valhal family, the Lumares. But the girl understands that it doesn't matter Lumares or Tenelf, because she avoided members of both families like fire when she was a princess. And if she had not become a bird, she would never have met them. At this time, someone says the name Zelaine, and the main character wonders if she heard correctly. A short time later, Sir Luke says that that's all, and the main character wonders why her name was mentioned during the meeting. And it's like a list of royals, then someone announces that they're going to be on a break now. And the main character, looking at how they leave, understands that the only thing that is unclear to her is whether this is a list of survivors or dead. And then Luke approaches the young lady and asks why she was angry and found herself outside, after which he brings the bird inside again and wishes Sir a good rest. He just looks at the bird, and the young lady realizes that she no longer has the strength to be angry, and the man just starts staring at the bird, and an hour and a half later, he is still looking at the bird, and the main character understands that she will not forget how he threw her out, and maybe she is oppressed by the atmosphere, but she will not be the first to start a conversation. But at this time, the commander turns to her and says that she was injured, which is why the girl almost falls and wonders if he really told her this. The man then only claims that he saw a wound on her wing, and the young lady, looking at her wing, thinks, is it really he about the scratch she received while dodging the arrows? But they have almost healed, but she can still notice them. The commander then asks how she got them, and the main character understands that he began to communicate with the bird and, in addition, is waiting for an answer. But this commander said that not everything was all right with her, but didn't he himself go crazy? And now he's strangely upset. The commander then says that if she promises to bring me trouble, he will let her out for a while. The main character is then a little surprised and realizes that, of course, she is cramped in the cage, but somehow she doesn't want to go out to the madman. Well, the girl then thinks that maybe she will be able to find out why they mentioned her name. Then the captain approaches the cage and releases the bird, which immediately flies onto the table with the documents. The girl then turns around and wonders if she can sit there and why he let her out in the first place. But the man only ties a rope to her leg and then speaks, that he would tell the soldier to examine her wounds. But the young lady, when she sees that he put his hand in front of her, wonders if he is hiding the papers from her. But it seems to her that she encountered Gron's people on her way and wants to tell him. However, when the girl opens her mouth, she only makes bird sounds and understands that in this form she cannot tell anything. And whether she's a princess or a bird, she can't do anything. The captain then only looks at the bird's downcast face, and the girl understands that Zelaine Beamock Meredith is a princess of the Roymond royal family and the 14th heir to Beamock. The young lady, when she was a little girl, sat with books, and in one of them she read that in Roymond, only royalty could put their name before their surname. And so, as usual, nobility depends on the history of its family and does not exist on its own. Members of the royal family, on the contrary, can give names to their successors, and their name consists not only of their own and the name of the family, but also contains the second name of the clan, and the main character understood that she had a truly royal name. However, she will not add him to history because she will not know glory on this earth. And if she somehow appears to the world, she will most likely plunge into eternal sleep. Since then, the girl never dreamed of having her name reflected in documents. The man turns to the bird and says that apparently she understands him, and the girl understands that although he doubts, he continues to talk to her. After which she wipes away her tears and realizes that she is growing doubtful that the bird is able to understand human language and that all is not lost. But the main character then sees a man opening some kind of box, and when he takes out something from there, the main character realizes that it is an army biscuit, and she had heard that it was so hard that it could easily crush the teeth of the one who bit it. Biscuit with just one hand, and the main character, watching this in shock, thinks that he crumbled it with one hand. The man then just turns to the bird and tells it to eat, and the main character thinks that this cannot be and he crushed it for her sake. But after that, she looks at the man and understands that he will all consider her a crazy bird if she doesn't eat, and to begin with, she will pretend that she is doing so. However, when the main character eats one piece, she realizes that it's not so bad. And the commander then claims that he ordered the bird to be given cooked meat and then asks if it ate it. The main character then understands that in Lope they really gave her cooked food, and the girl wonders if he really wrote this down in his letter. And so the attention to seemingly unimportant details, however, is very pleasant for her, and the girl then understands that she would have plunged into eternal sleep from hunger if she had not eaten something cooked there, and therefore would not have returned, and also would not have conveyed the answer to his letter. And the young lady then realizes that he approaches everything in a thoughtful way, as it turns out, and for the first time she is glad that they are on the same side. The commander then strokes the bird of hell again, only thinking that he is doing this again. The man then only looks at her with a cold gaze and says that even if there were neurons, he would not have believed it. And he finished her off on the spot, because animals don't do things that would be unlikely to harm them, and they have a strong survival instinct. But the fact that she suffered means that she was attacked, but he has no doubt that this was the work of Granois. A week ago, they discovered Grand's reconnaissance squad, and they must have tried to put her into eternal sleep. The main character then realizes that she went to Lopesh 4 years ago, and it turns out that despite the fact that he knew about the detachment, he did not report anything to her. And the man then says that he would not have attacked her if she were their bird. And since she returned with a scratch, it means that she is definitely not an enemy bird, and he can forget about his suspicions since the time of the confidential letter. But the message that she delivered this time is not so important. But now everything will be different since she overcame the enemy camp and remained alive. Therefore, now there is evidence that she is not on the side of the enemy. Zelaine then realizes that she was not attentive enough and trusted him too much, knowing that he is their ally. However, this man is extremely dangerous, and the young lady realizes that she must escape. Well, when a girl does this, the commander just grabs her. Then, with coldness in her speech, she says that if she is able to make him understand her intentions, then nothing is impossible for her on enemy territory. But on the battlefield, hundreds of thousands of soldiers die because of one message. And the man asks if she really thought that he would so easily believe the information that she brought last time. And if nothing is known about the royal heirs, then everything is bad. But then the man still decides to calm down and puts the bird back, after which he turns around and thinks why he got wound up. Neither with that nor with anything. He also says that the bird seems to actually understand what is being said to it, after which he again extends his hand to Zelaine, and she gets a little scared, but the man just takes it. And she puts her in a cage and then claims that at today's meeting, they agreed on her next mission. Then he leaves, and the main character, watching this, gets a little worried. After that, she stayed in Sir Valhal's tent for several days, but in the end it was not possible to find out why her name was heard at the meeting. Now the knight pats the bird on the head and says that it is a good job, and Zelen understands that so far her wounds have been taken care of. Then she managed to find out that the first and second princesses were possibly alive. Rohenheim is looking for all the heirs to the throne, but the main emphasis is on the above-mentioned ladies since their coronation is most likely. The girl understands that if Rohenheim had defended the capital at the time of the occupation of the palace, they could have evacuated them on their own. But the role of protector went to Lope, and all contact with the princess was severed as soon as she fled with the defenders from the palace. And the girl then thinks that they were not captured, just like her. But 2 armies are already looking for them, but then the main character remembers the commander and thinks why she remembers this harmful face. But if Granois had caught Lin Bessie, he would have carried out a public execution of such a strong and political opponent. And if Damiella had died while trying to escape, then Valhal, who is her fiancé, would not even have known. If she had been alive, she would certainly have found a way to report it, and yet the young lady wants to believe that they are alive. After all, this is the only way she can see Roymond's bright future. One evening, the commander, as always, sits by candlelight and thinks about something. The main character understands that Sister Damiella is the bride of Sir Valhal, and I wonder what the man feels not knowing whether she is alive or has already plunged into eternal sleep, anxiety, sadness, or, like her, nothing. The girl realizes that her older sister, Lin Bessie, married the eldest son of Commander Lope, and in the only way she overtook Damiella in the marriage race. By associating her younger sister with Ronama, she announced that she wished to gain the trust of the queen's faction, and he knows only one suitable candidate who meets all the engagement requirements. Lumares Valhal is the commander of the queen's faction, Rohenheim, and is the time they officially exchanged rings and oaths. The name Valhal became a terrible sound for the young lady, and she understood that she would plunge into eternal sleep if she contacted him. And in order not to even accidentally cross paths with him, the girl found out his schedule, and usually the man stayed at the Black Protective Wall. And he usually came to the capital and stayed there for about a week, all so that he could accompany Damiella to high society, where she gained important connections. And the main character tried to hide as soon as she saw his silhouette. And because of the eternal escapes, she did not even manage to develop his face. And Valhal most likely didn't know about her either, and she was satisfied with this state of affairs. But the girl thinks that it was worth finding a connection with at least someone who would start looking for her. And the guy probably feels enormous pressure but doesn't show it at all. However, by the way, the fact that he was chatting with her, that is, with the bird, just shows how bad he is. But this is the first time she sees him up close, and the man is still so young. The young lady's first half-brother was 10 years older than Lin Bessie, so she believed that the commander was about the same age. But as she already said, escape was then paramount, and initially she wanted to take advantage of the next task and leave Rohenheim. After all, if she stays, she risks dying at the hands of this paranoid man, and her past life was extended at the expense of her new one, so she sees no point in staying there. However, it is also ironic that she cannot leave because of Valhal. After all, he works so hard to ensure that Roymond is not erased from the pages of history. The man then turns to the bird and says that it has been looking at him for some time, to which the bird only makes a sound, and she herself understands that that's why she won't run away. Strategically important castles in the east with Grand flags were returned, and on the first day of her stay within the walls of one of the liberated castles, the girl received her next task. When a man takes her in his arms, the main character thinks why he is holding her like that, and she somehow feels uneasy. The man then only says that she has gained weight, from which the young lady understands that, to be honest, she really feels the heaviness in the back of the carcass. But the girl thinks that these are her muscles, earned through training. The man then asks if this will slow her down, and the main character answers in her thoughts that it won't slow her down, and what does he even know? However, the guy then opens the window and says that the weather will soon turn bad. Zelaine understands that, yes, the time must have come. Indeed, in harvest years, a typhoon always descends on the central region in the fall and will soon arrive immediately, after which the commander tells the young lady where she should fly, and she listens carefully. And the commander then says that although it would be better if he went himself, and the girl wonders if he really thinks that this is allowed to the commander-in-chief, or he also wants to be reborn into a bird just like her. The man then wraps a scroll around the bird's leg and tells her to return safe and sound. And the main character understands that she will show the results of her diet and workouts, after which she flies away. But then she thinks that maybe it's still worth running away because she already feels freedom. But the good side of the young lady understands that even if she flies away, she has nowhere to go, and where it is better to hear about the situation in the kingdom while in the Rohenheim camp. Therefore, you need to quickly deliver the secret message and return before the meeting begins. The man then thinks that even if birds are not able to understand human speech, this is not important. After all, he hopes that the success in the case of Lope was not accidental. In the letter, he wrote that they needed a profession to gather the remaining troops scattered throughout the east, and after the gathering, let them immediately go there. The man understands that if the letter does not reach the addressee, then they will not have a numerical advantage over Grand's army. And then he thinks it's strange that so much depends on a small bird, after which he looks at his hand and realizes that this motley bird is so small that it fits in his hand. But as soon as he looks into her eyes, the man catches himself thinking that he is being reprimanded, and he does not understand why he thinks so. However, then he turns around and thinks that it would be better for her to return before the wind rises. A short time later, the main character flies up to the Lope camp and says that Valhal should take a look at her amazing flying skills and see how easily she bypasses the Grand camps. But she can even understand human language. Well, then the main character realizes that she was originally a human, and she thinks that this is a rather pitiful sight, because why is she so happy if she is also a human? However, then someone comes out of the tent, and the young lady wonders if it is Sir Evan whom she saw that day. Well, when the girl sees who it is, she immediately turns pale and understands that she needs to run. When the bird rises a little higher, the man only tells it to fly towards him, and the main character then realizes that she is now a bird, and the man says that she is great. The girl understands that the leader of Lope and the husband of the first princess Linbesi is her son-in-law, and his name is Reborn. The man says that the bird must be thirsty, and then says that he will give her water. And the girl understands that if the plans of the first princess included her immersion in eternal sleep, then she probably discussed them with him. But he behaves kind-heartedly, but in her eyes this man is an enemy. The man now tells her to drink and rest. And the main character sees how exhausted he is, or understands that the man doesn't even know if his wife is alive, and he has no reason to show hostility towards her, so there's no point in being afraid of him. The man now puts his hand on his forehead and says that he has not heard anything about them, but then asks where they are. The main character understands that not only Sir Catsburn, but everyone in Lope is probably in search of the first princess. And it must have been very difficult for them to lose everything while their army was protecting their heirs, and the girl could not have thought that one day she would see her son-in-law in such a state. Well, she thinks that there is a benefit from her transformation, because no one will hide in front of a bird what they usually hide from others. A little time later, the young lady is about to leave, and they realize that they say there will be a storm soon, so she needs to hurry up, after which the girl begins her flight. She realizes that she doesn't know much about typhoons and this weather anomaly, which usually runs diagonally and starts from the central region. The last such time it was dangerous to go into the palace garden because of a strong thunderstorm, and taking advantage of the turmoil, then, under the guise of an accident, the illegitimate son of the governor was plunged into a crippled sleep, and after the end of the storm, all the heirs had to help eliminate the consequences. But only 2 were allowed to participate in this indirectly, and these were Linbesi and Damiel. They didn't experience the effects of the storm, so it's hard to say that they actually survived it. And the main character doubts that they know what threat the storm poses. Now, when the young lady comes back, she hears something making a very loud sound and wonders what it is. But it's getting louder and louder, so the girl understands that she needs to hurry. But her body becomes heavier and seems to be covered with moisture, and this is very strange. However, the girl understands that it is too dangerous to fly this way, but she understands that even if she spends more time on the flight, that territory should be avoided, so she does not understand what to do, and maybe she will be able to slip through. However, then the rain just begins to intensify, and the girl realizes that she needs to return to the camp as soon as possible, and believe that she should not have left the Lope camp at all, and we had to quickly fly to shelter as soon as we heard suspicious sounds. Now the girl understands that she is located above a completely flat area without a single tree or bush, and there is no hiding from the typhoon. However, then one of the stones flies towards the young lady, and she realizes that she will most likely fall into eternal sleep if she remains in place. But the girl then thinks whether all the people were evacuated, because on the eve of the typhoons, she was responsible for the evacuation of people from the central region and the distribution of food. It was dirty work for which no one would praise if she succeeded, but severely reprimand her if she failed, and this was her duty in peacetime. It did not bring political influence points, but even so the young lady liked it. She also smiled, looking at the happy faces of the residents. The girl heard that after the harvest a war would begin, and they said that the Rohins would be sent to the front while Lope and Ryoma would remain in the rear. And if not for this, then at that moment Rohenheim would be engaged in delivering grain to the barns of the eastern and central region. Huge harvests from the central region fed the population of the entire Roymond, and if Rohenheim does not distribute grain, it will be destroyed by a typhoon. As a result of this attitude, the kingdom will experience famine for at least 2 years, since the tornado will not leave behind any food supplies. The girl then understood that the typhoon originated in the north of the central region and ended at the borders with the east, and that meant the grain needed to be redirected to the west. But she could not voice her proposal to the first princess, because if she came out of the shadows, she might inadvertently cross her path and not wake up one morning. The girl understood that the war had really begun and a typhoon had descended on these lands. But now she is just a bird, and she does not understand who will be responsible for the evacuation this year and whether people will be able to leave the safe territory as well as get to a safe place. But suddenly the wind becomes stronger and another stone flies into the young lady's head, after which she begins to lose consciousness. And when it flies down, he wonders if this is the end. However, a little later she feels someone talking, and then the girl wonders what it is. But when she opens her eyes, she only sees a sword stopping in front of her. However, at the same moment, someone knocks this sword out of the attacker's hands, and the main character realizes that most likely there is a battle going on there. Well, the girl understands that she needs to escape before she is caught and returned to the Rohine camp to deliver confidential information, but at the same moment someone else grabs the young lady. But when the girl sees the tattoo under her eye, she realizes that this man is from Gron. But when he already points the sword at the young lady of the cake, he realizes that he cannot die there. Well, at that very moment an arrow flies at this man and he lets go of the bird. The girl then sees that it is Roymond's army and realizes that Valhal must be there, after which she realizes that she must deliver the letter no matter what. After which the girl sees one of the flags and understands that, judging by the direction of the arrows, she needs to go there. After which she sees Valhal pulling the string of his bow. But when he sees the bird, he is a little surprised and then shoots, and the main character manages to dodge this arrow. The girl then begins to lose consciousness and then suddenly wonders why she stopped. A little time later, she is already lying on a soft pillow, and someone is trying to collect a letter from her paw. And the girl understands that this is a confidential letter, so she will not give it back, after which she immediately screams, and another voice says that he will take it off, and the young lady realizes that he is very familiar. The girl thinks that her eyes are dry, and this voice says that it seems that the bird has not yet regained consciousness. The girl, looking at the brunette, thinks that he is all wet and does not understand what she should do. Sir Luke then turns to the crazy bird and asks what's wrong with its head. After all, it seems that she crashed into Sir Valhal for the second time and probably earned a bump since she hit the armor. The young lady then remembers this moment and realizes that the man was Valhal. And it turns out that he came to save her, however. The man then only gets up from his place and heads towards the bird. The knight then tells the commander to leave the bird because it bites, but he says that everything is fine. After which he takes the bird in his hands, and when it does nothing, the knight is surprised and wonders if she is now behaving like a good girl. The man then says that it looks like the bird was caught in a storm because there is dirt and leaves all over its carcass. The main character, watching how the man unwinds her paw, understands that she seems to be wounded, but then she thinks where the letter went. And the knight then only sighs and says that thanks to this they did not understand that this bird was a messenger and they were lucky. Even though they attacked the reconnaissance group not for the sake of the bird, but he is glad that they managed to save the falcons with a secret message for them, and the main character then thinks, did they really save the letter? And the man just says that it's lucky that they arrived before they roasted the bird, and the girl is then in shock, wondering if he wants to say that she could have been chopped up for roast. The commander then says that the Grauna would not have stood by if they learned about Ryoma's regrouping, and the knight then says that he will try not to gossip about it again. The main character understands that Ryoma is the army of the king's faction, and the Eastern army may have taken the greatest blow since the conquest began with them. During the war, the Black Protective Wall, which Granwa also surrendered instead of Rohenheim, was guarded by Ryoma. And the girl then understands that the confidential letter from Lope probably concerned Ryomu, but she thought that the war destroyed their army, but she believes that this was not so. Granwa's strategy is to win and weld the enemy's castle. With instant speed, as soon as they plant a flag in a new place, their army begins to move on, and in such conditions, there is no time even to finish off the fallen soldiers. Consequently, after the defeat, the surviving Ryoma soldiers hid in the forests and spread out throughout the eastern territory. But then the male knight overdries one of the chips and says that the Granwa line remains unchanged, and they are aware of the strategic importance of the Black Protective Wall, but in any case, a battle cannot be avoided. The commander, holding a bird in his hand, says that before this. However, then he only looks at how the main character seems to sparkle, which is why she gets a little scared and almost sweats, after which she starts fidgeting. And a man with black hair turns to Sir Luke and tells him to convey the order to the Black Elite Squad. Hide traces of movement along 5 paths because they should take advantage of the rainy weather, and the knight says that he understands and then sets off, leaving the commander alone with the bird, and the main character thinks that it looks like Rohenheim is trying to gather Ryoma, battered by battles, in order to regain the Black Protective Wall. Now the man is still sitting behind the papers, and the main character is having a meal at this time. She remembers how the man told her that he did not know what she was trying to hear there, but there was nothing in the letter that could be interesting to the bird. After which he treated her wound and said that it would hurt a little, but let her be patient. And now, nervously chewing her food, the girl thinks that Valhal was the first to perceive her as a spy bird. So don't let him think that he'll get off with just one dinner for this. But then she looks at the man and realizes that today he has a pile of documents on his desk again. But she thought that the commander-in-chief was engaged in training troops, waging war and giving orders. But however, Sir Luke and the other main knights are also all at work. But the young lady wonders if he really does all the paperwork on his own because he doubts his subordinates. And besides, after the meeting, he completes work with documents on the same day, and this means that the man sits on his papers late in the evening until early in the morning, and the young lady seems that this has nothing to do with military affairs. And even though the position of commander-in-chief is very tempting, it is clear how exhausted he is from it, and his entire reward is a short rest before dawn. Therefore, as the young lady already said, this is poorly connected with military affairs. But then she wonders what he's up to and wonders if she should check. After which the bird flies up to his desk, but the man at the same moment hides the documents. And the main character, seeing this, immediately gets angry and thinks what a greedy bastard he is. But he just folds the documents and asks if she wants to say something. The main character then starts jumping on the table, and the man says that it's a confidential letter. This time was very important, and she didn't need to know any of its contents. The young lady then thinks what kind of childishness is this, and is he really looking for a fight? After which she immediately flies up to the man and thinks that she is going to peck his eyes out. However, he only claims that the bird did an excellent job, which makes it lose its balance because it is very surprised. The man adds that this time she made an invaluable contribution, and thanks to the fact that they were able to contact Lope, they were able to reduce human losses. The main character then calms down a little, and the man claims that the commander must collect all the information about military operations after the end of the war, and he will include in the report a record of her merits. The main character then wonders whether he is going to write about her in government documents. And the girl then suddenly remembers her sisters, but thinks that she is not going to leave traces of her existence. And she will not receive recognition on this earth. But she made promise after promise. But the thought that the girl would appear on the pages of history for the first time, even if it's not under the princess's name, she's very happy. So now the main character is almost crying. At this time, the man hears something creeping, and when he looks outside, he realizes that it has started to rain. But after he gets up, he hears the bird making sad sounds and thinks that she is crying again. The next day, the weather is already becoming good, and the knight enters the captain's room and then claims that he is with a report. He also says that information has emerged that the body of the third princess has been found. The main character then thinks that she has really fallen into eternal sleep, and the commander then says that there is another one, and the girl wonders if more people have fallen into eternal sleep. Valhal then asks where the body is, but the knight hesitates a little and then says that it is hanging on the black protective wall. The main character is then a little surprised by this, but she herself thinks that this wall is still occupied by Manhwa, and even if they know the location of the body, there is no way to get it. And the young lady then wonders if the body of the princess's brother was found next to her. When leaving the palace, they fled in the same direction as their mother, the king's second wife, and they would have survived together if they had been able to escape successfully. Or they all fell into eternal sleep together if they were caught. But the fact that the body of the fourth prince was not found could mean that he is still alive. He was the adored son of Viceroy Lope I, as well as the heir to the royal family supported by the allied families of Ryumu. And these connections can help rebuild the eastern region if he survives and unites with Linbesi. Well, the young lady is worried about only one thing, and this is that the relationship between the third princess and the fourth prince was not ideal. When the night comes out, the commander just puts his hand on his forehead and realizes that this is already the fifth obituary for the heirs of the royal family. And the king, after leading his children out of the castle, committed suicide along with his fourth wife in the royal palace and left other family members behind. Consequently, there were 4 spouses and 6 heirs left. And if the prominent ones were able to escape together, they would be able to return to their families without long journeys. Well, now the man is clutching this message, and the main character is thinking that I wonder if someone could have deliberately not conveyed the fact that he survived. However, they have no reason to hide this from Rohinem, and she is sure that they are being cautious and just haven't made themselves known yet, because as long as hope glimmers and news comes from the heirs of the royal family, Rohenheim will protect them at all costs. The man then says that at least one, and then repeats it again and says that he is sure that at least one heir survived, but then he looks at the bird, which makes it flinch. Then she claims that tomorrow she will have to fly to Lope again, and the bird just nods. The man then believes that he is seriously communicating with the bird, and then claims that by the time she returns, this place may no longer exist. And the young lady then thinks in shock what he is talking about, and the man claims that after she flies away, a battle with Manhwa will unfold there, and if she catches her, then she will need to turn to Lope and wait there, to which the bird agrees. And the man then hands her a piece of meat and says that, however, if everything goes smoothly, then the road back will take less time than the road there. The bird then looks at the man and realizes that she has that feeling again. Well, she thinks, why is this so? The man feels some discomfort at this time, and he wonders if he really feels so uncomfortable from an ordinary bird. The main character then grabs a piece of meat and eats it. The captain is then silent for a while and then thinks that, first of all, this bird cannot be left alone in the tents during the battle. Well, then he grins and thinks that he has the right to let her out of the cage. However, at the same moment the man realizes what he just said and then puts his hand on his forehead and thinks about what he is thinking about. Then he leaves the room, and the main character wonders what's wrong with him. The girl realizes that before her third mission, Valhal showed on the map a bypass route around Gron's camp, and since his army did not stand still, it was necessary to know their exact location, and also where exactly the battle will take place, and the main character thinks that she will understand if she is not told the exact place. However, the fate of 40,000 soldiers Roanima will be decided in the battle for the Black Protective Wall, and if they win, they will be able to remove the body of the third princess from the wall. The main character understands that the third princess, Azelia, is the most beautiful girl among the 4 daughters of the governor, and since she appeared around the same time as the second princess, Demiella, her relationship with her older sisters was not strained. When looking at the main character, she was filled with the same emotions that manifested itself when interacting with the fourth prince, and it was painful contempt and envy. The young lady was unsure of the source of her envy, but she felt that she was putting her life in danger by standing nearby, therefore, as was the case with her two older sisters. She ran away as soon as the third princess appeared on the horizon. Zelin didn't like Azelia back then, but be that as it may, her descent into eternal sleep makes her angry. After all, the blood of the royal heirs has a sacred meaning in Roymond, and she is like a thread that ties the three armies of the kingdom together, and hanging the body of the third princess on the wall. Granois made his intentions clear, as if telling everyone that the connection that Roymond maintains has been destroyed. And the main character now understands that the time has come, after which she flies at full speed and thinks that this time she will disobey orders to avoid Grand's army. And the girl also thinks that instead she will head to the very center of the camp and fly straight, so it would be better for Valhal to win and not fall into eternal sleep. The captain at this time looks at the sky and says that the days are getting shorter. The man also understands that if the battle begins at noon and continues after nightfall, then Rohenheim will be at a disadvantage. And as someone who has defended the wall for 10 years, he knows the benefits. And one way to turn the flow in their favor is to stretch out the battle, and two is to drag it out into the night. And now both of these advantages are working against them. But they need to bring the Black Protective Wall back under their control. At the moment, there are 40,000 soldiers in the army of Rohenheim, and in the army of Graun there are 25,000, and the former outnumber the enemy. But the Black Protective Wall is worth the advantage of 15,000 warriors. Granois will post archers along the perimeter of the walls while the Rohenheim will be forced to climb up. And in the worst-case scenario, we will have to consider the option of blowing up the walls. And after all, Granois is confident in the success of the siege, and their army believes that if they are at the top, they will never lose. After all, they themselves approached the Black Protective Wall so many times, unsuccessfully trying to get inside. And the man is now thinking what impudence this is, because the Granois invaded their lands with an army of 100,000 soldiers. 25,000 remained to guard the Black Protective Wall. 5,000 occupied the castles of the eastern region, and another 20,000 occupied the capital where the palace is located, and finally the remaining 50,000. They are located next to the Lope camp, and if he had been there, their advisor would have been ready to take the military in the capital and send them to the Black Protective Wall, up to a figure of 50,000 soldiers. But the man says that this is just a theory, and he understands that Granois has set up a large camp downstream of the Cherry River in the central region. And this is a good solution because the river makes it easy to transport goods and the place is slow-moving. But at the same time, their camp risks being underwater during a typhoon, and Roymond's people would avoid this territory. But no one in Granois knows about this, therefore. As soon as their settlements suffer from the cataclysm, they will lose a lot of supplies and manpower. The situation in the ranks of Granois may also be far from their knowledge. And, for example, information about 20,000 soldiers in the capital may turn out to be a lie, but the man understands that if in this battle he manages to win back the protective wall, Granois' forces will be driven into the central region, and then Ryumu will gather his forces in the east. They will receive the exact meeting place as their flag will be hung over the wall again, and everyone flocks to it like moths to the light of a flame. The man now realizes that he hears a sound from the horn and understands that there is only an hour left before noon, after which he picks up the flag. Well, at the same moment, the main character takes off near the flag, and the man, looking at the bird's eyes, realizes that they are yellow and resemble the color of Roymond. And the commander wonders if this is why he felt such pressure. After all, he should look into the eyes of this falcon. How for some reason he sees the lands of his native kingdom in front of him. Now the man once again hears the sound from the horn, after which he sees how the knights begin to gather and understands that the time has come. When the main character flew to the Lope camp, another man already met her there. He told the servants to bring food and water for the birds, and also stated that the meat should be cooked. The young lady then realizes that the flight took half a day longer than Valhal had expected. Well then, she wonders where Sir Caburn went. After all, now his half-brother is there, and he is the commander of the first detachment of the Lopesh army, and his name is Even. But when the girl looks at him, she sees that both his face and leg are wounded, and Lopesha must also be constantly fighting with Granois' army. Although they did not participate in large-scale battles like Rohenheim and Ryumu, however, it is little easier to defend the borders while being cut off from support in the western region. But be that as it may, The western region was lucky because for some reason the Granwa quickly occupied the entire territory up to the central region, but closer to the west they slowed down, and most likely they believed that they had already won a victory over Roymond and therefore moved to fight with other countries. But thanks to this, Lope had enough time to prepare to defend their territories, even taking into account the superior power of the enemy. Now the knight gives the young lady meat and tells her to eat, and the main character then already understands that she should just eat for now. But then someone turns to her and tells her to eat and sleep, and after recovering, she sends an answer because she will need to immediately return to Rohenheim. The young lady understands that, of course, compared to the road here, the place through which she must return is much more dangerous. A short time later, the commander of the first detachment says that it would be necessary to rewrite it, after which he says to call the secretary, and the main character is already shaking with anger. She thinks later and gave her the letter because you can rewrite it for so long. The secretary then says that he is listening to the master, and he asks if there are any rules for writing the names of royals in confidential letters. And the secretary then claims that, yes, the numbers should be written in letters and not numbers, and the full name must be written down. And the man then asks if he knows how to spell the name of the 8th princess. The main character then realizes that they are talking about her, and the girl wonders if they are going to write her name in a confidential letter. And a little time later, the man puts a seal and says that now everything, after which he says that the bird should be pulled out of the cage and brought there. And when the message is tied to the young lady's leg, she understands that this is confidential information about her fate. Well, when a man tells the bird to fly and only pushes it a little, then she falls as if she is unconscious. The commander then thinks what happened and says that she was fine just a moment ago. Well, the knight then says that it looks like she is in pain, and then claims that there are 2 more birds in their camp, so let them return this one to the cage and bring another. However, the main character then realizes in shock that she cannot be allowed to be closed here, after which she immediately jumps up and circles in the sky as if to say that everything is in order and she will fly. The knight is a little surprised by this, but then says that she seems to have recovered and then tells her to fly already. Zelane then understands that she needs to keep her head straight again on the way to Rohenheim, and even when she arrives, she needs to do a lot of things. Flying over the Cherry River, she will have to overcome the Granwa camp, where the main forces of the army are concentrated, and what is more important, a confidential document tied to her paw. You definitely need to read it to find out if she's still alive, so the main character understands that she must return alive, and no matter what. I remember my past experience of being shot at by a girl flying at an altitude at which they would not be able to hit her, and it would have been possible to rise very high, but the thin air made it difficult to breathe, so the flight speed suffered. Now the girl understands that flying at such a height is dangerous, and yet there is confidence in her soul that she will not die. However, then someone fires one arrow and the young lady almost gets hit by it. The girl then thinks in shock how the arrow can fly so high. And after all, she read about a new word in military technology that the Granwa army uses, and this is a crossbow, which increases the radius of destruction. After which the young lady realizes that it is too late to fly higher, and now she needs to fly away from the affected area. But perhaps it's worth going lower to increase the speed, and then the girl thinks that it's good that she can do it too. However, at the same moment another arrow flies towards her, and the young lady feels a sharp pain and then screams. The young lady realizes that her legs seem to be on fire, and it seems to her that she is about to plunge into eternal sleep. The girl then begins to cry, but she cannot speed up because of the pain because her wings are paralyzed. But she understands that if she falls down, only a bad ending awaits her. So she decides to fly even higher. The young lady with tears in her eyes tries with all her might to fly higher while the arrows fly near her, and she wonders if she will really die. But a young lady is not capable of harming another person and cannot even escape from her offenders, and the only thing she can do well is put her life on the line. At the age of 11, due to a conflict between the heiresses of powerful families, a terrible whirlwind swept through the palace. The young lady was then very frightened and understood that discord was inevitable, given the fact that there were several consorts of the king from different powerful families. The first wife had no children, but had the support of the first and second princesses. But she had a serious conflict with the third and fourth spouses who wanted to concentrate power in the hands of their offspring. The first wife took advantage of the differences and even tried to eliminate her in order to strengthen the position of the first and second princesses. And no one could prevent the desire of the older sisters, as well as the first wife, to eliminate her, with the exception of one person, and that was the governor. When the girl was little, she often hid in his office, and there she made origami from documents with information so secret that you could be speechless. The governor, having learned about this, immediately asked what she saw, and the young lady, pretending that she did not understand at all the importance of the documents, listed all the secrets she had read and ultimately punished her on the spot for the period you added until the moment. When these secrets were no longer so, she saved her 11-year-old self from the first assassination attempt. And she was also able to survive, but she didn't try to live, she tried to survive. The girl now understands that this is her natural ability, and this time she will also survive. And now she is wondering how the falcon can reach maximum speed. After that, she remembers how when she was a little girl she saw a hawk carrying its prey. The young lady was then surprised and realized that she had to spread her wings and dive, after which she did just that. And when she turned around, she saw that she had dodged, and the girl also noticed that the wind had begun to blow. After which, having got into one stream, she immediately accelerated and now understands that she was able to do it. However, suddenly she begins to feel bad, and the young lady wonders if she has lost so much red liquid that she feels like she is about to lose consciousness. But the young lady understands that she still has a long flight to get to the Rohanaima camp. Well, when the girl approached the black wall, she saw that the flags of her kingdom were already there and understood that before she plunges into eternal sleep, she will see what she wanted so much. After which the girl begins to collapse and thinks that this time she is really happy. But when the young lady opens her eyes, she feels that she is in the fabric and wonders if she has already fallen into eternal sleep. But the girl then screams and thinks how much her paw hurts. At this time, she sees that the commander opens it and says that she is alive. The young lady then thinks, is it really Sir Valhal? And the man then just closes the fabric back, and the main character then begins to squeak. But the commander says that this will not let her freeze, and the young lady then thinks how she got to the Rohenheim camp because I still had to fly for a long time. And the man then claims that it looks like she managed to fly to the black protective wall in this state, and the young lady then understands that that view was for real. But the commander claims that she crashed into the flag and he softened the fall, but the problem is that it was the central flag. The young lady then wonders in shock if it was really the only flag in the camp. And when the commander says that she should be grateful that she was able to use it as a softening pillow, the young lady thinks why, of all the flags, she had to crash into the central one. The man claims that he must be the reason for her serious injuries, after which he touches her paw and asks what happened. And the main character then, in shock, thinks he won't execute the bird for violating a military order. And after all, he needs to take full advantage of the situation. After which the girl pretends that she is in so much pain that she is about to fall into eternal sleep. The man is a little surprised after this and asks if there is anyone outside, and then someone answers, and the man strokes the bird. After which he says that whoever is outside should call the doctor because it looks like the bird is seriously injured. Well, then he says that he thought she understood him, but apparently she didn't. The main character is surprised after this, and then realizes that he thinks that she suffered because of the fact that she flew straight like an ordinary bird. But the young lady understands that as soon as he is not understood, he immediately suspects others of espionage, but she does not understand why he is so upset that she does not understand him. And this is not at all the case. But then the young lady remembers the confidential letter with her name on it, after which she immediately jumps up from her seat and begins to rummage through the documents. The man immediately turns around and says that her wound has not yet been closed. If she moves, they will only open. However, the main character then only screams, as if asking where the confidential letter is. And the captain then grabs the bird and then points to its paw, which has already turned red, and claims that it will be worse for her if she continues to be capricious, but the main character just screams for him to let her go. The girl turns to him in her thoughts and says that she heard that her name was written in a confidential letter, so she must know what happened to her, after which she asks to show her this letter. But the man then only unties the bandage on her paws and claims that it seems he said not to get hung up on the letters. However, the main character understands that if she had arrived safe and sound, she would have been able to overhear their meeting, but it's too late. so she will have to read it herself, after which the young lady just screams again, and the captain says that he is trying to treat the wounds. But then he just looks coldly at the main character and asks if the pathetic bird refuses treatment. However, looking at her wounded leg, he still sighs. Then he takes out a secret letter and says that here it is. But then he said that in return, let her allow herself to be healed normally after she looks at it. And the main character then only looks at him approvingly, which makes the man a little surprised. And the young lady then opens the letter and understands that she should most likely find out, but the knot is not untied. The captain then says that she is so eager to receive this letter, or better yet, to read it, to which the main character only nods, after which the man takes the letter in his hands and unties it. Zelane then sits on the commander's shoulder and realizes that she can finally read the confidential letter. However, when the main character looks at this letter, she realizes that she cannot read anything other than her name. And the man then folds this letter back and says that he showed it, and then says that this is enough, and then the main character screams. But at this time, another knight comes into the room and asks if Sir called him, to which the man says that the knight should heal the bird. The knight then says that he understood them, but the young lady then only digs her claws into his finger, causing him to scream. A short time later, the knight is already treating the bird, and the other knight, when he sees this, asks what he is giving her. Sir Luke then claims that this medicine is based on plants that relieve pain, but the main character only thinks how bitter it is, after which he says that he is ready and asks the bird to behave well, and also not to offend Sir Valhal. The main character then only closes her eyes and thinks whether it's because of the medicine that she feels so weak. But then she hears the commander enter the room and say that this is better. Well, the young lady then just lies back and realizes that she does not have the strength to bother him. The commander reaches out his hand to the bird, but suddenly freezes, after which he strokes it a little and leaves. However, when he hears the bird moaning in pain, he freezes, and then turns around and sees that the young lady is trembling all over. A short time later, the main character wakes up and thinks how much her paws hurt, and also realizes that the effect of the medicine is wearing off. The man then asks if the bird is in pain, and she, a little in shock, realizes where she is now and thinks what she forgot on Valhal's table. The man then says that she was lucky, and if she had arrived even a little later, she might not have survived. But suddenly his blackness spreads a little, and the main character understands that it means she really could plunge into eternal sleep there. After which, she trembles a little and realizes that the very thought makes her feel uneasy. But it's even a little strange, because now she's trembling with fear while she's lying under the yellow flag. She feels protected. The girl then thinks that no one has ever protected her before. Well then, he just puts his hand on his forehead and says that this confidential letter does not contain particularly important information. And the main character then realizes that her name is written in it. But he says that there is nothing important there. And although she is not the royal princess he is protecting, how could he do such a thing? The young lady then remembers her older sister and then wilts a little. But after that, she immediately begins to kick the documents on the commander's desk and realizes that she is the only bird of Rowenheim, and he cannot put her into eternal sleep, so no matter what he says, she will not be afraid. However, the man then only gets angry and says that he will stop feeding her, which makes the main character immediately calm down. A short time later, she is already drinking water, and the man, looking at her, says that he does not understand why she is so obsessed with letters, but he claims that he did not lie, and there is no progress in the search, so there is no importance in the letter. The young lady then wonders if he is talking about searching, and the man claims that 6 more heirs have not yet been found, the 1st, 2nd, 8th princess, and the 4th, 10th, and 11th prince. And the main character then, in shock, wonders if her body hasn't been found yet, and this means that the viceroy, as well as 5 other heirs, have already plunged into eternal sleep, and even the 12-year-old 9th prince. The man claims that according to their information, the 1st, 2nd, and 4th princesses used the western gate when escaping from the palace, while the 8th princess, the 10th and 11th prince left through the east gate. Zelane then nods and realizes that they were playing the role of bait for Granoise's troops. The man claims that Lope believed that the royal heirs were hiding in the west, so he began his search from there, and they were responsible for searching for those who fled to the east. However, according to Lope, the 10th and 11th princes have no hope of salvation, after which he burns the confidential letter. And he claims that this is why they were asked to prioritize the search for the 8th princess, and this was what this letter was about. The main character then understands that none of them have been found, and that hope must have almost died out. The young lady wants to say that the little bird in front of him is the princess he is looking for, but the young lady wonders if he could trust her. After that, he throws breadcrumbs, and he claims that they did not find traces of them in the east, but since they have recaptured the black protective wall, it is worth continuing the search, but in the central region. That's when he leans in a little and claims that even if everyone says that none of them survived, he won't believe it. The young lady then feels pain in his words and thinks that it is because he is not willing to accept their descent into eternal sleep. After all, if all the royals die, then he does not understand why he will have to fight, or he actually believes that someone might still be alive. The man, then, seeing the gaze of the birds, shudders a little. Then he turns around and says that he must be tired again, and then says that he needs to get ready. But the young lady then only pecks at the bandages on his hand and thinks about his wounds. But the man then remains silent for a while and then claims that this bird is strange. And the main character just smiles and thinks that it's nice that he realizes her exclusivity, after which she thinks that she will not tell him that the 8th princess is because she does not want to destroy his hope that one of them is still alive. And even if this hope does not concern her, after which the bird gets a little lost towards his wound. And the captain says that she is really very strange, but he doesn't know why. The main character begins to feel very weak and wonders if there was medicine in that water, because she really wants to sleep, after which she falls asleep, and the captain just strokes her. A short time later, Sir Luke approaches the young lady and tells the bird not to get sick, after which he offers her something to eat, and the young lady rejoices in response. The girl understands that since the secret letters are encrypted, they will not be able to interpret them, and in this case everything is in order, after which the young lady begins to move the chips. But when she is almost finished, someone takes the chip from her hands and tells her not to touch it. It turns out to be the captain, and he claims that this is not a toy. The main character then thinks when he came because she didn't hear it at all, after which she screams that he will regret it, but the man only tells her not to move, after which he straightens the flag and says that since it is impossible to predict the time of the next battle, it is important to decide whether to leave the wounded behind, because the leaders are waiting for his decision. However, then he puts his hand on his forehead and says that the situation is not good, because even though they mobilized Royman's forces, this is not enough to cope with them, not to mention the need to let the plundered people of the central region know about their plans. After all, even if they completed the task of the soldiers from the west, my path for salvation has not yet been prepared. Well, what's even worse is that the army that attacked Surzan in the north began to retreat, but then heard about the return of the protective wall to their control. But suddenly, when the man sees the bird's gaze, he suddenly stops, and the main character wonders if he was taken aback, because out of habit he began chatting with the bird. After which the man gets angry and says that if only he could turn into a bird and see everything with his own eyes. The young lady then realizes that she thought he was talking nonsense, but in fact, he was sincerely saying that he would like to become a bird. He-Man now takes one of the pawns in his hands and understands that the army of archers serves as their protection. And because of this, it is difficult to accurately calculate the location of their camp, after which he claims that it is necessary to find out where they are hiding in order to reduce their losses. Therefore, let the bird not bother itself in vain, and the main character just screams as if telling him to wait, after which she again puts the pawns together and tells him to look, because the necessary information is there. And the man then jumps up from his seat and asks if she flew that way, after which he asks if she ignored the order and if she was in her right mind. He claims that he should have guessed right away when she appeared so wounded. And how can one be so fearless? The main character only trembles with fear, and the man then claims that it turns out he said that if they lose her, it will be bad, after which he puts his hand on his forehead and thinks that he cannot believe that the bird acted so recklessly, after which he claims that he still did not believe that it was rabid. But apparently this is true, after which he lets go of the bird and sits on his butt at his table. The main character then, a little worried, once again points to the pawns and asks Togo to trust her just once. The man then looks at her, but then turns around and takes out one of the papers. The young lady does not understand what he is doing, but after the man draws something on paper with a brush, he says that he needs to ask something and then says what if she really flew over that territory. Then there should have been a large tent there, and the man asks if she saw it. He claims that this general's chamber is called Zheng, and in their lands it is like the commander-in-chief's tent, but since it is located at the very beginning of the camp. Then, based on its location, they will be able to determine the movement of the army. And the main character thinks that this is really that tent, with a huge, creepy point, after which she points with her paw and realizes that it was definitely larger than the others. The man then circles her and asks if this is it, but then states that, as expected, they are moving upstream of the Cherry River. The commander then only stuffs this paper into his clothes, and the main character thinks why he doesn't call the others because it seems that before he was serious about her injuries. But the man only claims that because of her, the 8th princess almost came into danger, and if the bird had been captured, the Grannois would have noticed the entry about it since it was not encrypted. And the main character then understands that this is much more serious than revealing an ordinary secret, because they could find out that their efforts are being devoted to searching for the 8th princess. And if she were caught, it would put the 8th princess at risk, and so she wonders whether she will be punished. She understands that if the soldiers go against the order, they will either be scabbed or deprived of their heads, but she does not think that they will tie up the bird and beat it with whips. So there is only one method left, and that is decapitation. The girl, thinking about this, gets very scared, but then the captain grabs her. And the young lady only thinks with horror in her eyes that she does not want to fall into eternal sleep. However, then they only put her in a basket and the girl is surprised, thinking that she will not be deprived of her head. And the man, when he ties her up, otherwise says that they will tolerate more madness. And from this it follows that she has no more tasks. The young lady then thinks in what sense he is saying this, and the man only claims that he will no longer use her as a messenger bird, after which he turns around and leaves the tent. And the young lady then lies down and realizes that she is alive. But the girl thinks that even though she is alive. However, now the commander is not going to use her as a messenger. But this is the only work with which she could help her country. But at least she delivered important information, but the young ladies still think that this is not enough. And although the head remained with her, it felt as if something else had been chopped off. That evening, Sir Luke peels one of the apples and is already thinking about how he will eat it. However, at the same moment, the Emperor abruptly enters his tent, causing the guy's soul to almost sink to his feet. He turns to Sir Valhal and says that if he needs him, then why didn't he just call, wondering why he came himself. The man then takes the apple in his hand and tells them not to write the army code whenever they want. And the guy then says that he was going to eat it anyway, and there is nothing important there, but the man then thinks that by capturing the black protective wall, they regained control over part of the central region, and this fruit is from there. From the central lands, where many ships are located, and almost all the country's fruits grow in these gardens. Most of Royman's soldiers also come from the center, so sweet and juicy apples will serve as excellent motivation to quickly recapture their homeland. However, the man understands that one has only to think how the bird looked at these gardens from above, and dodged a hail of arrows from the army of Grannois, and also bled liquid the color of a scarlet apple. But suddenly the man hears his knight calling him and shudders a little and also squeezes the apple. The knight asks why the man came, and he just understands that he can't believe that he's worried in an emergency situation. And the birds, then he puts down the apple, and when the knight looks at it, he sees that it's already bent. The man then only places the translucent paper on the map, and the knight asks what it is. After which the commander claims that this is a map of the location of the Grannois camp. The knight then, in shock, asks what he is talking about and where he got this card, and the man claims that it was from a reliable source. And the knight then realizes in shock that he could not even imagine what he would hear from Lumaris Vilhale, such a streamlined formulation. The man then claims that it is difficult to explain, but he decided to trust this information. And the knight then claims that he is ready to carry out the order and listens to it carefully. The man then claims that about 4 days have passed since the camp was set up, so there shouldn't be any significant changes. And the knight then thinks how the man realized that 4 days had passed. And the commander claims that until reinforcements arrive, they will most likely remain in place. After which the commander also points to the largest spot and claims that it is Zheng and their camp is moving along the Cherry River to the north. The knight then says that, and most likely they were influenced by the river overflowing its banks due to the typhoon, and since they are not familiar with the climate of Roymond, they probably decided that it was dangerous to stay on the southern banks and left. The commander then says that this is true, but they know the climate. The knight replies that, and since there will be no more natural anomalies, the southern shores are safe, and besides, in recent days the sky has become cloudy, so that Granois' army is afraid of getting caught in another storm. The man then swipes the map and says that therefore they need to create a food route through the south, and this is the path that will connect them with Lope's army. The knight is then a little puzzled and asks what if this information is false and the Granois camp is still located in the south. But this is like falling into a trap, because there are 50,000 of them there, and there are only 38,000 of them. The commander then says that this is true, but they need resources for the soldiers. Fortunately, they managed to recapture the Black Protective Wall, which affected the morale of the troops, and he thinks that now is the time. The knight then realizes that he is not one who would make such a decision without weighing the pros and cons, and since Sir Valhal has decided to trust this information, he can only follow the order. Therefore, the knight says that he understands and asks if there will be more orders. The man claims that he will hold a strategy meeting in Samgyeong. Samgyeong is the time between 11 in the evening and the first night. Therefore, let him gather the commanders and bring them to his tent. A short time later, they were already discussing something, and the strategy meeting was repeated for several days during their progress. The main character, who did not have any tasks, just ate and rested. Then someone turns to the bird and asks why it eats so much, and then one of them thinks that he wants to hold on until the bird reacts. Another knight then asks if this bird should be given a name, and Sir Luke replies that Sir Valhal will not like this, and then the knight still wants to ask for it. But Sir Luke asks if they have seen him become attached to something, or put a sacred meaning into an ordinary bird. After which the knights immediately answer that no, and Sir Luke then says that they have decided. However, then one of them says that the bird is so cute, which makes the main character a little embarrassed, and the other knight says that it seems to him, or the bird, is embarrassed. Sir Luke then sighs and agrees, but tells them to leave and then turns to the bird and asks if she wants it. Well, at this time, the commander comes into the tent and tells them to stop this. All the other knights immediately run away and only Sir Luke remains near the bird, after which His Highness looks at him sternly, and the main character then takes the rope in her beak and thinks that if he feels awkward, then let him untie her paw. But the man then only looks at her coldly and approaches, which makes the knight a little puzzled. After which the commander claims that it is bad to keep the bird inside, and the main character thinks why his face is so close. After which the commander orders her to bring an apple leaf from an orchard in the eastern part of the camp, and he says that if she doesn't bring it, she will be left without dinner. The main character then immediately takes off and thinks that she is still a patient, and although her wings are fine, her body is still in pain. The girl thought that at this meeting she would listen to a discussion of important issues about her, so they sent her away, after which she thought that, well, okay, it's nice to warm up again. A short time later, the knights come out and say that they did a great job, and one of them then turns to Sir Valhal and says that Toby had previously suggested giving a name to the bird, after which he asks what the commander thinks, but he only looks at the knight coldly. Then he says that they are in the midst of a war and asks whether coming up with a name for the bird is so important. He also asks if they both really want to receive punishment, after which the knight says that no, and they don't want to. However, then he is silent for a while, after which he turns to Sir again and asks why he doesn't just send the bird back to where he got it from. And isn't he annoyed that he has to take care of the bird in his tent? To which the man claims that he has reasons for this, and the knight says that they really don't like playing with birds, so the reason is clearly not his. He also heard that someone saw him talking to a bird, and the commander then furiously turns to him and then claims that he said that he had his reasons, to which the knight nods and then says that, of course, and the commander then tells him to leave. The knight then asks what he is talking about, and the commander claims that Sir Luke is distracting him, so if he's finished, then let him leave. And when the knight is already near the tent, he wonders if he was just kicked out because of a bird. The brunette then puts down his feather and realizes that even though he sent the bird away so that it would not eavesdrop on important conversations, but with a wounded body, The annoyance would be difficult to reach, and the man thinks why he did this. After all, he could have simply left her affection outside. However, at the same moment, the main character flies into the tent, after which that unfortunate leaf from the garden spits and breathes heavily. The man then says that she must not be in the mood to talk because she is tired, and the main character only squeaks in response to this. The commander is a little surprised, but then he turns around, and the main character wonders if he's gone nuts. The man sighs heavily and thinks how pathetic he is since he enraged the bird, but lately just by looking at her. He really wants to flare up, but he doesn't understand why. The main character then understands that from the very day he instructed her to bring leaves from the apple tree, Valhal began to overwhelm her with all sorts of meaningless tasks. And now the young lady is flying because the man told her to deliver it to the catering tent, and Zelen thinks that he does this every time she tries to eavesdrop on something. But she doesn't understand why the man is so careful despite the fact that he trusted her information. Now the cook says that the bird has flown in and then says to bring dried meat there, and the main character understands that the man is doing everything to prevent her from being present at the meetings. Now the cook gives her meat and says that the bird is doing well and she can eat and then fly away. The young lady then eats, but after that she thinks that the meeting is not over yet, and he will simply give her another task if she arrives earlier, so the girl decides to sit there. But then someone turns to her, and it turns out to be the same soldier who looked after the messenger birds and whom she grabbed at the first meeting. He now turns to the bird and says that it seems to be doing well. The man also claims that he heard that she lives a carefree life in the commander-in-chief's tent, and it seems that she is well taken care of because she is clean and plump, so she definitely does not suffer from hunger. The main character then thinks what it means to live a carefree life, because she doesn't have enough paper to describe all the tortures to which she is subjected. However, the knight only strokes her and tells her to consider herself lucky because she is the only one left at their camp, and everyone else has fallen into eternal sleep. The young lady then realizes that it appears that the other wounded birds that returned to camp did not survive, but they are at war, so you can fall into eternal sleep at any moment, whether you are a person or a bird, and she hopes that it will all end soon. The knight also pets the bird and says that the commander-in-chief usually does not keep the bird himself, and she is the first who lasted so long, and he takes good care of her. The young lady understands that despite his busy schedule, the man pays close attention to care and feeding. And the knight then says that maybe the commander-in-chief will keep her as his pet, and the main character is thinking about it. She almost faints because she thinks, how can she be a royal, perhaps as a pet? And of course, in this state, she doesn't have any palace privileges, but being a pet is already out of the ordinary. The knight at this time turns to the bird and says that if the man does not keep it with him, he will return it to him as soon as he is finished healing. But at this time, someone turns to the knight and says that he should stop chilling and let him go there, after which the knight leaves the bird and says that they have been waiting for him, so he will go. A little time later, when the main character is already returning to the commander-in-chief, he says that she is late and asks if she was running away from her duties while sitting in another place. But the young lady then only wonders whether she will be his pet, and realizes that if she cannot find her body after the war, she will be stuck in the body of a bird. But the girl thinks what happens to the messenger birds after the end of the war, and they can be released into the wild or sold to falcon farms. Well, the man then just pokes the bird with his finger and asks if she is listening to him. He claims that he said that it was time for her to change the bandages, so let her not twitch, after which the man wrapped the bird's leg. And the main character thinks that without taking into account his stinginess and coldness, the commander-in-chief is not such a bad person, and he takes care of her, cleans her eyes, and also feeds her, and this is very nice of him. And the only thing that darkens this image is his reluctance to share information about her homeland. Now the man asks the bird what it is and how it hurts people, and the main character understands that if there is even 1,000th chance that the bird will remain forever, then she doesn't even know what will happen. After all, if she can survive by becoming his pet, then so be it. Since she is already with him, then it's not scary to become a pet. And the main character only looks decisively at the man, but she still understands that there is another reason. The commander-in-chief then realizes that this bird is again looking at him strangely and does not understand what she is thinking about. Zelen realizes that, regardless of the issue of survival, she still cannot leave the camp. After all, she receives all the news about the war and her body only when she is next to Valhal, and she cannot afford to live the life of an ordinary bird. After which the girl remembers the knight's words that if the commander-in-chief does not keep her with him, he will return her to him as soon as he finishes his treatment. After which the girl kicks the matchmaker's tweezers and realizes that if this is the only way to stay with him, then she will become his pet. After which Zelane begins to caress the commander-in-chief's hand and act cute. The girl then wonders if the man understands that she is cute. Well, he just asks if she ate something wrong, and the main character understands that she needs to hold on because she can do anything. After which she once again acts cute and thinks that he should make her his pet because she is a cute little bird. However, the man only looks at her in bewilderment and remains silent. The young lady then realizes how ashamed she is of herself, and she asks the commander-in-chief to at least react somehow because she is still a princess, and above all, a person. The girl also can't believe that pretending to be cute is trying to serve you up to the pet. But this doesn't matter because she has already achieved a share of success since Valhal hasn't thrown her out yet, and it seems he doesn't hate her that much. But the man then ruffles the hair on her head a little. Then he smiles and says that's good. The main character then extends her hand to him. But then he suddenly stops and then realizes that she almost touched the corner of his lips without realizing it. But the young lady also thinks what kind of thing this is and whether this man knows how to smile. But he should do this more often. But he is stingy in everything. A little time later, the main character is surprised because now she is eating from the same table with Valhal. One of the knights then hands his colleague a large piece of meat, and the others tell him to at least cut it. His colleague says that he won't be able to handle such a large piece, and Sir Luke then tells him to eat because it's not every day that such a luxury appears on the table. The main character then realizes that she had forgotten that living with a stingy man means eating the same thing as him. And Sir Luke then says that he can't believe that he's been eating meat for 3 days now, and it's as if there's no war at all. However, the commander-in-chief then only looks at him sternly and claims that since meat gives them a reason to relax, it is worth removing it from their menu. But the knight then says that not at all. At this time, one of the knights gives the bird another piece of meat and tells it to eat, and the girl understands that most likely there is a special reason for which they eat this meat or will soon be, but she is not sure that the man will allow her to stay at the meeting. However, the girl thinks that Valhal allows her to move more, and the food has become more nutritious. The knight then says that he has important news, and the main character then notices the commander's gaze on her and is a little puzzled. But he then only looks away and says that they should report, and the young lady then wonders in shock if she was really allowed to listen, after which the knight says that it's true. And he claims that he caused panic among Granwa's troops as he asked, and also slightly increased the combat power of their army, and yet, behind the black protective wall, the losers can mingle with the crowd and start a brawl. Based on this, the number of wounded will increase, and the outcome will be impressive. The man then takes his mug and says that it's clear and it's a great job, but the knight then asks if it wasn't his idea, to which the commander-in-chief claims that they have tried, and so they will be able to gain control over the region downstream by sacrificing much fewer lives if Granwa succumbs to fear. The main character then understands that there will be a battle as she thought, and the other knight then claims that since the Cherry River has not dried up yet, they will think that they will take risky actions because they are in a hurry, and the other knight says that he will be glad if that's what they think. The commander-in-chief then claims that everyone who contributed their share to the victory will be rewarded, and he will remember this event. And the main character then thinks whether it is possible that he is telling this to her, and does he really mean that he will reward her if the information she gives will help in the war? Well, the girl then realizes that it can't be because she clearly misunderstood him, and does a bird really have the opportunity to receive recognition for its exploits? Not to mention being included in historical records along with the commander-in-chief is a great honor. And the man at this time claims that they will arrive the day after tomorrow, so let them make sure that no one fails. The main character understands that this will happen soon, and at this time the knights will obey the commander-in-chief. A little later, the man lets the bird out of the cage and says that he has released it, but let it behave well. The main character, when she looks at him, understands that the commander-in-chief is tired, and he understands that he has a lot to think about. But now, this bird is distracting him. The main character then sees a drawing of a ballista under her paws and realizes that these are attack-type weapons used for siege, but she has never seen them in person. However, the girl thinks that this battle has nothing to do with the siege, after which she looks at the commander-in-chief and thinks that the other soldiers were sent to rest the day before the battle, but he has barely sat down all day, and the young lady thinks that tomorrow's battle will be a lot of pressure, after which she sits on his shoulder and rubs herself against his face and then thinks that he also needs to rest in order to give a decent fight tomorrow. The man then asks if the bird is worried about him, and then says that everything is fine now since the wounds are almost healed, and the young lady, looking at the scar on his hand, thinks whether he managed to get hurt somewhere, because he is hardly so weak that he is unable to defend himself. Yes, and other commanders would not allow their commander-in-chief to be offended, but then the girl thinks why. And the man then takes her in his hands and says that because they knew each other. They won the last battle with the black protective wall, and it was important to open the gate. Well, in the end, when it comes to protecting the goal, it is important to defend it even at the cost of your life. And from the moment when he had to sacrifice a lot for the sake of a breakthrough, he became reckless. The man continued to cut down his opponents as he walked through the palace on the front line, and it was quite risky to go deeper as part of a small group. Well, when he reached the end of the castle and finished off the signalman at the back gate, he knew that victory was already in his hands. The young lady then wonders if he is talking about winning, and the man claims that despite the fact that the gates were open, Granoise's troops were not much inferior to them, and if the battle had dragged on, there would have been more casualties. So they used the signalman's rock to create confusion and played a signal to retreat. Granoise's army fell into a panic when they heard him, and unaware of their good battles, they began to retreat. Thus, the battle lost its meaning, and even knowing that the battle unfolding in front of him would be won, he was not sure that he could withstand the pressure of Granoise's forces that came like waves, and only after dealing with the last flag-bearer of the entire enemy army and standing in front of his army, the man finally realized that he was wounded. But he would not have done this if he did not believe that the only way to save Roymond was to break into the castle by force. The girl understands that Rohenheim will be able to declare victory in the war only after overcoming the Black Protective Wall. But she still gets angry and screams that he shouldn't have risked his life like that. After all, the army of the entire country is waiting for his orders, and if he plunged into eternal sleep there while she returned to him in order to prepare for the next battle. Therefore, now the young lady angrily asks what he was thinking about, committing such a rash act, but since she is a bird, the man does not really understand her. However, he squeezes his hand and says that this battle is of a different kind, and even if they win it, he is not sure that it will help Roymond. The main character then looks at his trembling hand and thinks what he is talking about, because it is obvious that they must win to save Roymond, and after victory, they can begin to reunite the central region and return the banks downstream under control. They will build a bridge connecting the occupied territories and then receive provisions as well as support from Lope. However, if they drive Granoise's army into the trap of the unfortunately northern central region, then based on previous experience, it can be expected that the local residents will suffer seriously. The main character then realizes in shock that there will be a real massacre, and the man then claims that he cannot tell anyone about this. The suffering of the soldiers that their commanders must endure, and the royal family are not on the same level because those who give orders must make decisions based on the outcome of the majority, even if it means sacrificing one or more groups, and they do not face the consequences directly. They are thus comfortable with bearing the burden of responsibility. The commanders, in turn, experience the consequences on their own skin, but since they only carry out the order, they do not feel remorse. And no matter how many people die, it will not be their responsibility, so they learn to mindlessly follow orders and go straight to the enemy. But it so happens that Valhal simultaneously gives and executes orders, and he makes a choice in favor of the majority and at the same time feels guilty for the decision. The girl understands that this must be an incredibly difficult time. Well, then she seems to touch his scar and says that every time he looks at it, he remembers that he is risking for the sake of the heirs of the country, and let him share his feelings with everyone and not bear everything alone, because he has already fulfilled his duty by putting his life on the line. Well, the man then thinks that he knows that this is not so and does not believe in it, after which he turns to the bird and says that it is not that it can understand human speech, but he thinks that he cannot even imagine how this is possible. However, the man then claims that he feels as if she is listening to him, and this makes him feel better. The main character then seems to smile, and the man then sighs heavily and then tells her to rest because the decision will be made tomorrow. 10 days after the battle for the Black Protective Wall, Rohenheim's army of 38,000 soldiers invaded the coastal camp of Graun. This was essentially a raid on the enemy army and was the result of Valhal's efforts to disperse wounded soldiers along the wall in order to increase mobility. Granois spread his camp along the course of the Cherry River after the typhoon. Therefore, only a small number of people remained downstream, and even if Rohenheim attacked, the main army expected an attack in the center due to the river overflowing its banks. But Rohenheim was aiming lower. Now the main character understands that the commander-in-chief has a shaggy and frightening appearance, as well as the strength emanating from his bearish physique. The knights immediately scream that the monster Rohenheim is there, and they should run away. And the main character understands that he also has terrifying ball skills, and all this is a description of the commander-in-chief Valhal, created by the panic that Sir Luke sowed in the ranks of the Granois army, who are now trying to save their skin. Under his leadership, all escape routes viewed from the air were precisely blocked, and Granois christened Valhal as a monster with eyes in the sky and let these rumors benefit the battle. But I also had to put up with being labeled a freak. Now, Sir Luke says that the effect of the monstrous Sir Valhal is incredible, but he only tells him to be quiet. The main character then realizes that there is a strong red liquid blowing nearby, and yesterday they destroyed the entire reinforcement group that arrived in the vicinity of the camp. But perhaps this was necessary to hide the fact of the attack on the lower parts of the camp. However, in addition to the red liquid she sensed, the girl thinks how much longer their soldiers will have to spill it. At this time, the young lady hears someone entering the tent and realizes that it is an unfamiliar helmet and armor, as well as the aroma of fish. The young lady then gets a little scared and wonders who he is, but then just closes her eyes. The man then takes off his helmet and claims that he stopped by before the celebration ceremony. And the young lady then looks at him and realizes that this is Sir Valhal, after which she immediately sits on his arm and wonders what he's doing there. And the man just takes out the ribbon, after which he hands it to the bird and says that everyone in Rohenheim receives this thing on the king's birthday, and he got it from the loot warehouse. The main character then remembers that this is their symbol, and the man only ties this ribbon to her paw. The man claims that during the battle, he was struck by the thought that if God had sent her to him, and perhaps he wanted their victory at any cost along with the rise of Roymond. The man then repeats the word victory again and says that it belongs to the young lady. Zelaine is surprised by this, but at the same time someone calls the commander-in-chief and he comes out, after which the young lady hears screams that it was a great battle and he was amazing. Some of them also ask how he found out about their escape routes, and the main character only remembers those words that victory belongs to her. After which she still makes a little sad sounds and thinks about the dead allies who plunged into eternal sleep as a result of the battle. And the girl understands that she must bear the burden of responsibility for all their lives, because she is the 8th princess, and this is the beginning of her first victory. From that day on, Valhal no longer tied her, and he didn't kick me out of the meeting. The girl then thinks that he really doubted her until the battle on the Cherry River, and therefore did not allow her to listen to what was said at the meeting. Despite the fact that he himself saw how Granois looked like 3 times, now the young lady just screams, and Sir Luke flinches from this and says how she scared them. One of the knights then asks if Sir Luke is insulting her again, and a little later, the main character is already flying over the river where a bridge is being built, and she thinks it's so refreshing. The girl then sits on a branch, and one of the knights then orders the other to carry the boards there. The girl, watching this, understands that the weather is beautiful, and the river is so hopeless, and she believes that they are building a bridge between this, the central and western regions, and all this that was inaccessible to the palace brings fun. But the girl is also wondering when she will be able to continue her work as a messenger. And after all, the man said that this victory belongs to her, yet he punishes her. Well, the girl then understands that this is true and she needs to return, and also complain to him. and if she bites something similar to a confidential letter, then he will understand everything. After which the young lady does just that, and a little time later flies into the tent. Well, there she sees the commander-in-chief along with the knight. When a man sees a bird, he is a little surprised. And the knight only says that he thought that Manhwa would lie low until reinforcements arrived in the north of the central region, but the army was moving faster than he expected. The brunette then says that yes, and this is an unexpected turn, but he likes even less that they chose the west as their goal, because Lope has a lot to protect. The main character then realizes that she should listen to what they are talking about, after which she sits on the commander-in-chief's armor. Well, suddenly she hears another bird chirping and then turns around. Then he sees that there is another bird there. The young lady then wonders in shock what it is, and is it really a male messenger falcon? The girl is then sure that there were no other birds left besides her, so she wonders where this male came from and whether he was caught recently. The girl then also wonders if they found a replacement bird for her, after which she looks furiously at these two and thinks that this is how it is, and then begins to squeal. The knight then covers his ears and says that this bird likes to do weird things, although lately it has been quiet. The commander-in-chief then says that animals have a concept of personal territory, and probably she conveys to the other bird that this is an invasion of her space. The knight then claims that disputes over territory arise only between animals of the same sex, and they are different, and the commander-in-chief then understands. And after that she says that she is probably too wary, but the main character thinks that this is not the case at all. The man lived claims that when the enemies take over the West, the people will have a hard time, so let the knight tell the residents to flee to the fortress. Sir Luke then agrees, and then says that the best solution would be to gather provisions and people and then escort their fortresses. But the main character at this time still screams and thinks that he should just look at how intelligent she is, and so much so that she even shows human habits, and in general she is a bird, not a person. The girl then remembers that pathetic falcon and wonders if he really is going to exchange her for this. The commander-in-chief then takes that falcon in his hand and wraps a letter around it, and the knight then asks if he thinks that the Lope trained this bird well. The main character then thinks whether this bird is really Lope and wonders whether the commander-in-chief will simply take away all her laurels, as well as her pet status. The knight at this time then says that what a pity that he needs to be returned, and the main character thinks whether they will send him back to Lope, because if so, this bird is a messenger. Well, then the girl rejoices and thinks that this is not her replacement at all. The knight at this time claims that he is leaving, and the main character thinks that this is true, and Valhal will not do this to her if he considers himself a man of honor. The other falcon then makes a sound, and the main character thinks that he just wants to communicate with her since they are representatives of the same species. But the girl then thinks that if you look closely, he is dazzlingly beautiful, but the main character then slaps herself and thinks that she needs to get herself together, and how can a bird be beautiful? She doesn't know what came over her, but then she thinks that she will at least greet him. The commander-in-chief then says how noisy it is with the two birds, after which he goes outside and sends that hawk. The main character, looking at how he flies away, thinks really, and she always flew away gracefully as well, and the commander-in-chief then turns to her and asks what now, and what was she worried about the young lady. Then she thinks, is he really worried about her feelings? After which he realizes that, as expected, she is completely different from other birds, and only she trusts him to send letters. After which she flies up to the man and rubs herself on his cheek, and also understands that only she is worthy of being his pet. The commander-in-chief then only sighs and asks why she is so fickle. The main character then thinks that she is the sweetest and only she is on your side, but wonders if he disagrees. However, the main character then suddenly understands what will happen if she really remains forever in the body of a bird. The man then turns to the bird and asks if it is hungry, but the young lady just looks sad. The girl understands that the messenger birds ensuring the transmission of letters between Roanaim and Lope were plunged into eternal sleep, but they had to have a way to survive the Battle of Cherry River. But it is reported that the Manhwa are heading to the west and not to the northern part of the central region, and this means that there was no massacre or revenge in the capital. However, the man then claims that he did not know that she was a female. The main character then realizes that she is actually thinking about important things, and the commander-in-chief then claims that he saw her chatting with that bird and wonders what the birds are talking about. And the young lady then thinks, how can she know? And should it mean something because she was just making a sound? And the girl thinks that although she looks like a bird, she is not one. The man then asks if she liked this bird, and the main character just squeaks as if asking what kind of nonsense this is. And the commander-in-chief then turns around a little in shock, asking if she liked it, and the main character then only infuriates the sign of agreement. And the commander-in-chief then smiles and says that it's good then. And the young lady then, in shock, does not understand what he is talking about, but thinks that he did not understand anything. However, when she looks up at him again, she sees that the man is already without his shirt, and the girl immediately lowers her gaze. She realizes that she has never seen the commander-in-chief naked before, and even though they lived in the same tent, he always went to bed later than her, and the girl only heard the rustling of the fabric, so now was her chance to look at everything. She looks up and realizes that it is true that she has something that she cannot, and the girl is not one of those who miss the opportunity to see something, after which she stares at the man and he just wets the cloth. The main character realizes that his body looks very strong, but when a man imagines a rag to the tank, he remembers that he has a bruise there and shudders. The main character, looking at him, thinks that he is huge and wonders if she knocked the man off his horse during the battle, because where could he get such a bruise? The young lady then thinks that it probably hurts a lot. However, the man then turns to her and asks why she is looking at him like that, because this is not such a big wound. However, the main character looks at him sadly and thinks how many people died in the battle, even if he suffered so seriously, and for how many people he had to suffer. The girl understands that Linbesi is the first princess, and she and the governor made a deal. Before his name disappeared from the throne, Lespel was the first to wish to receive the title of victorious king, and he announced the war plan in front of the royal family. This was the beginning of the Cherwidge War that Roymond destroyed. Many heirs voted for the start of the war in order to gain the glory of the winners themselves, probably with the governor. But Linbesi, the first daughter, supported by Lope and Rohenheim, hesitated. And if the first lady opposes it, then Rohenheim and Lope will not advocate the start of hostilities, and the decision can be postponed until the governor goes crazy due to various circumstances. Lespel was the first to be well aware of this, so he threw out the Ryumu card. They were unquestioningly loyal to the current king and fully supported the heirs to the throne, whom he favored regardless of their mothers. Both the king's faction and the east of Ryumu were at the same time. The man then turned to Linbesi and said that if she came out in favor of war, he would give her power over Ryumu, but if he thought otherwise, then let her think about whether a foreign war is so bad compared to a civil one. Civil war between Rohenheim, who stood for the first princess, and Lope, who supported the fourth prince along with Ryumu. This was an open threat to give the throne to the fourth prince. Lebenzi, who did not want civil war, accepted the deal and supported the military conflict at the behest of her father. She understands that the girl made the wrong decision because a civil war would be a better foreign one. The Ryam that she wanted to get were destroyed, and less than half of them remained, and the country is now almost completely destroyed, and they don't even know whether she's alive or not. Therefore, the girl thinks, did she really not understand the consequences at all? And she didn't want this. Now the man turns to the first aid kit and asks what she is thinking about, and the main character understands that the warlike Demiella, the two-faced Linbesi and Lopechi are together with Rohanim, that they were supported. They all made the wrong decision, but the main character, looking at Sir Valhal, understands that she does not doubt him, and no matter what her sisters wanted, this war should not happen. Not long after the bridge was completed, support began to arrive from the west in the form of military rations and bags of harvest. According to what Valhal announced, this is a full-scale restoration of the central region and counting the people's militia at the Bridge of the East. And Ryam defending the Black Protective Wall, the mobility of Rohenheim increased, which was lucky for them to regain power over the city. And now the commander-in-chief is already entering it, and the main character understands that since the inhabitants inside the fortress were determined to open the gates to their soldiers, then, overall, without exception, places where Rohenheim took place, a yellow flag began to fly. Valhal, liberating the city, took her with him everywhere. Now the man offers her food, and the main character rejoices and understands that she has become a pet in his eyes. So, as a protest, he stopped giving her the job of delivering messages, and the main character began to look for things to do on her own and searched for places in the fortress that needed repairs. The girl then realized that an inconspicuous place on the roof had fallen apart, after which she reported on the routes of retreat of their military enemies. And then she looked for wounded soldiers. And finally, she found the location of enemy soldiers in territories that had yet to be conquered. Valhal fought surprisingly well, and although he scolded her for her reckless behavior, she was useful to him. And working together, they were able to achieve an unprecedented fair victory. And the louder his name thundered as a war hero, the more famous she became as his mascot. The girl understands that she reached places where she could not reach, for which the army received the title of Eyes of the Sky. The Granois did not use messenger birds, and because of this, a rumor spread among their army that Zelane was the second body of Valhal, which he used to figure out their camps by noticing them through the eyes of the bird, dodging all the enemy's arrows despite the tape making her a prominent target on the battlefield. Rumors about the commander-in-chief's faithful bird only strengthened. On the other side, no one from Rohenheim believed this, and for them the famous bird was only their commander's pet. They believed that the golden ribbon on the paw was a symbol of her affiliation with Valhal. Now the man gives the bird meat and asks, doesn't she understand that the more she exposes herself to the enemy, the more danger she exposes herself to? The main character thinks why, and is it bad if it brings victory in battles? And after all, she is there, so the girl thinks why shouldn't he use her? And she's actually smart, so it won't be difficult for her to avoid danger. The man then says that the good thing is that they were able to deliver food to the west and were lucky that they were not pushed east. The man also claims that they transported all the harvest from the central granary to the west before the outbreak of the Churwich War, and that they usually split the stock in half and transport parts to the east and west. But this year, everything was stored in the western part, and even though the process may seem strange from the outside, but before each typhoon arrives in the central region, there is an equal separation of reserves for the west and the east, but most likely there are changes in the distribution. Occurred with the approval of Her Highness the First Princess. His Majesty the King also has direct influence on distribution, but usually he is not interested in it. The main character then understands that everything is coming together, and at that moment she was preparing for war on the spot in an outburst of sincere belief in her victory and expansion of the territory. The commander-in-chief claims that when the order was given to transfer crop supplies to the west, it was difficult for the soldiers to cope with the workload because preparations for war had gone, so he clarified the order with the royal family. But it turned out that His Highness herself did not know about this order, and she thought that it was an order from the king. The main character then understands that at that time the governor probably assumed that this was an order from Lin Bessie. The man then claims that if he had disobeyed the order then, they would not have been in this state, and since war in conditions of food shortages threatens large losses, they were able to go so far thanks to the supplies they had. And whether it is the foresight of the royal family or something else, thanks to this, Roymond will avoid the worst-case scenario. The main character, in response to this, seems to smile and just let out a squeak. And the man pats her on the head and thanks her too, because thanks to her help, they were able to replenish their supplies. The young lady is then a little puzzled, thinking that she really helped to avoid serious losses, but there are still plenty of victims, after which she becomes a little sad. And she understands that it was not she who went out onto the battlefield fighting and cannot take over the blanket of his merits. The man says that therefore, let her not do anything stupid anymore because they will still need her, so let her value her life. The commander-in-chief also claims that her existence, which could save many lives, is priceless. He also adjusts the ribbon on her leg and the main character when she thanks Sir Valhal in her thoughts. Lope's army and the main character, seeing how the hawk flew in, wondered if he had flown in with something. However, he then only threw the mouse in front of the young lady, and the main character thinks why he brought it. The falcon then only makes a sound of contentment, but its contentment does not last long. After all, at the same moment the commander-in-chief grabs this mouse and then throws it out the window, and he claims that this bird doesn't eat this, which causes Falcon to be shocked, and the main character thinks that he really brought her something to eat, and that means it's a gift. Well, then the commander-in-chief puts a piece of meat on the plate, after which the main character immediately rejoices when she devours it by both cheeks. Then the man only looks at the hawk with a satisfied grin. And after he removes the letter from him, who does not break eye contact. And the main character understands that this is a confidential letter and thinks that she also wants to look. However, when she sits on the commander-in-chief's shoulder, the knight claims that if the bird continues to enjoy his trust, then they will not pat him on the head. However, she then only looks at the man with a puppy-like look and scratches him a little on the shoulder, to which he says that he understands, after which he opens the letter, and the young lady understands that this is Royman's language, so she can read it too. The letter indicates that the addressee is Lope, and last night Granois' army set fire to the abandoned city, as a result of which some border towns were captured. The main character then understands that the capital was not plundered, but Lope in the west is having a hard time, and most likely they are not able to completely repel the power of Granois with an attack. But it is also problematic for Roenheim to provide assistance because the central region has not yet been completely conquered, and since he needs to capture and ensure peace at the same time, the central region is still partially under control Granois. At this time, the man gives the knight a letter, and the main character realizes that the western region is also under constant attack by the enemy army and is still in an unstable state. At this time, that hawk approaches the young lady, and the main character in shock thinks why he behaves this way. And the commander-in-chief then turns to the knight and tells him to put the hawks in a cage, but he just concentrates on the letter and asks what it's about. However, then the commander-in-chief in a gloomy voice tells him to lock the hawk in a cage, and the knight then realizes that he did not say a word to him while reading the letter, and now he is behaving like this. Well, then the realization suddenly comes to him that most likely the man is jealous of these two, and one verse comes to his mind about the dancing of birds in the sky, full of feelings, and in this verse he asks who will now brighten up his loneliness. And this makes the knight unable to stop laughing. Well, after that, he just leans against the wall and understands that he shouldn't think about such things, and the commander-in-chief is still watching with a cold gaze. How a hawk pesters his bird. A short time later, the knight turns to the commander-in-chief and asks, does he remember how he said that he should get married as soon as possible? The commander-in-chief then asks what kind of hints these are and tells the knight to simply take the bird away already. But the knight claims that it is quite natural for males to show interest in females, and he asks if the fact that he brought a mouse is not a sign of courtship. The commander-in-chief then asks if this falcon really likes his bird, and the main character then in shock thinks if he really likes her and the mouse is courtship, after which she immediately flies up and thinks that he should leave behind because she is a human. But the falcon then only takes off after her, and the young lady thinks that he should not pursue her. The knight then tells the gentleman to take a look and just smiles. But the main character at the same moment flies to Valhal, after which the man looks at this falcon and tells the knight that his birds don't like it, so let him remove the falcon. The knight then, a little puzzled, asks why Sir is doing this, and the other messenger birds died, so they need them to make new ones. However, the man then only asks whether animals have the right to refuse. Roger then, in dismay, says that no, and that is, how can they understand that this is a refusal? And after all, the commander-in-chief is not a bird to know for sure. And then Valhal says that in any case, it's not he who then tells the knight to lock the falcon away, and this is an order. The knight then says that he obeys, but then realizes that he cannot believe that a man is giving orders for the sake of such a banality. The main character then realizes that she almost lost her bird's innocence, but she didn't even exchange glances with the man, so where does she belong in the role of mother of the chicks? However, the knight then turns to the commander-in-chief and asks if he is already worried, and Valhal then only looks at him furiously. And the knight then runs away, but claims that he has simply never behaved like this before, and he has finished reading the letters, so he will go. Well, the commander-in-chief then only coldly tells him to stand, and the knight understands that the tongue is his enemy. However, when he turns around and asks what such and such a man says to take this hawk with him, and the knight asks what this gentleman is talking about. But he just looks at him furiously and asks if the knight should repeat it then, and then he flinches and then says that there is no need, after which he leaves with that hawk and says goodbye. And when the bird is taken out the door, he screams, and the main character thinks that thank God they took him. After conquering one of the main cities of the central region, as well as leaving the recaptured castle, the Roenheim remained in the camp. Now the man turns to the main character and tells her not to make noise because there may be people there who want to harm her. The main character then thinks what happened to the messenger from Manhwa, and the girl thinks that she is Valhal's second body, so there is a rumor that when she is plunged into eternal sleep, he will be plunged into eternal sleep. The girl then realizes that he was trying to hide her because the news of the loss of the Eye of the Sky would raise the morale of the enemy. Well, the girl doesn't understand why he does this, when he can simply hide her in another tent, or perhaps he wants the girl to listen too. Well, when the young lady is covered with a basket, the commander-in-chief says to let the messenger in, after which he enters the room and tears off the package, after which he begins to read with a stutter. It says that they greet the commander, and the leader of the tribe reports that he came to them with an offer of negotiations. The knights then become a little wary and realize that Grana is a conquering state, and the United State of Grana continuously started wars in order to distract the population from internal conflicts. Their strategy was not to rule, but to conquer them. Due to this approach, they did not bother learning the language of other countries. However, the difficulty of understanding their speech was ignored even when signing international relations, and the fact that they are now chasing stutters means that they must catch the knights if they want to negotiate and believe their language is not even worthy of learning, after which the commander-in-chief screams that enough is enough and the messenger shudders from this. The man thinks how dare they send such an incompetent messenger, and then tells him to give him the letter and he will read it himself. However, when the commander-in-chief reads this letter, he begins to understand its essence, after which he looks at the messenger with a furious gaze. And then he hands the letter to the knight and tells him to read it out loud. The knight then begins to read, and says that it is written about the withdrawal of troops from the south to the fourth gate, and holding the front line for 40 days, and also that the 8th Princess, Roimonda, will be kindly transferred into their possession. It also says that the surviving 8th Princess will go to Roenheim immediately after returning to her previous positions, and they will send one of the princess's personal belongings as proof. Now the commander-in-chief asks if they have one of Her Highness the princess's things in their hands, after which one of the knights hands the commander-in-chief a package with something, and he says that they should detain the messenger and not take their eyes off him, because they will not let him go until they prepare an answer, to which the knights agree. And a little later they are all looking at this package. One of the knights then turns to the sir and says that their opponents are telling lies on their ears because their army captured the palace, so they have the princess's personal belongings on their hands. The other goalkeeper then says that Kayan is right, and 40 days is already too much, because by that time reinforcements will arrive to them from the north, and he is sure that this is what they are counting on. And the other guy says that not to mention the fact that the thing could have been removed from a non-living body. The man then takes something out of the bag and says that whatever is in this paper bag cannot serve as proof that the princess is alive. However, when he takes out the ribbon, everyone understands that it is a royal family pattern. And the main character looking through the basket understands that this is her thing. One of the knights then claims that these people are taking advantage of the fact that they do not know the whereabouts of the heirs. And the other knight turns to Sir Athorn and asks if they are not in the same position. And he does not think that they know where they are. But the blonde then asks why Sir Toby took it. 3. The man claims that if they knew where the first or second princess was, wouldn't it be more profitable to say that this thing belongs to them? And the other knight then claims that, however, if the 8th princess is still alive, then she is the only heir who. But the commander-in-chief then raises his hand and tells them to be quiet, because the question is why they hear about a princess they don't know. And after all this time they were looking for the heirs of the royal family, carefully documenting every piece of valuable information. But despite this, they did not find a single news about the 8th princess. Yes, today, having received a letter from the enemy, Sir Luke then turns to the commander-in-chief, asking what he thinks about this, and he says that he thinks they have no reason to lie. The knight then says that if they capture the front line, and at the same time cannot guarantee the safety of the princess, they can again capture 4 castles before the arrival of the enemy attachment. And the other knight says that this is true, and they know it very well, so why should they lie without benefiting themselves? Another knight then asks how Granois can trust them and announce that they will release the 8th princess. And the other knight says that this is exactly what he said, because they can violate the agreement on the front line as soon as they return the princess. And there is no point in doubting because it was their side that invaded first. So if he were in their place, he would hold her hostage for as long as possible. But the commander-in-chief says that there is something fishy with these negotiations, after which he rises from his seat and says that for now the heads of the squads should send troops to search for information about the whereabouts of the 8th princess. And then he also plunges the knife into this paper, and he demands from Granois a handwritten letter from Her Highness the Princess, after which he says that they are all not free. He then approaches the bird and picks up the basket that was covering it, and also states that it is all over. The young lady then wonders if she is really alive and realizes that it is just as she thought. This blue satin belt with ornaments was given to her by the viceroy for the ceremony and coming of age. But the girl thinks that it is not so important when she received this gift and from whom. But what is important is that on that day, she and her other brothers and sisters fled from the palace. And at that moment, I only managed to take this tape with me. The girl now thinks how stupid it is because this thing has become important to her, because it belonged to her mother, who died 3 years after her birth. The main character recalls how His Highness said on the spot that the girl's eyes were similar to her mother's eyes. The young lady only worshipped him, and he claimed that the time would soon come to marry her off. The girl understands that they wouldn't have known her age if it weren't for the coming-of-age ceremony, and since he allegedly wasn't interested in her personal life, she entrusted everything to Lin Bessie. And this happened when she was interested in marrying her off, and when the young lady was still alive. The girl understood that she would marry a man whose name she did not know and give life to a child in exchange for her own. This was outrageous, and the young lady wondered who she was to involuntarily put her life on an envelope. Only she was responsible for herself. The young lady realizes that her mother was the viceroy's second wife and came from a family living in the central region. A family so poor that it is not even depicted in portraits. She probably knew that the child of a queen without power would not leave a significant mark on history. She knew, but still gave the young lady a life that neglected her own, and the young lady thinks that even though she had no father, and there were no records about her in history, but the woman was the one who wanted her to be born, and my mother cared about her more than about herself. The young lady realizes that she saved her patterned ribbon after receiving it during her coming-of-age ceremony. And I never wore it, but the satin ribbon is the color of her eyes. It became a monument that testified to its existence. Therefore, it was with her that day that the young lady fled from the palace. But the girl thinks whether they dare to say that she voluntarily handed her over to the people of Granois. And in general, she is there, but she is alive on the other side of the front, and the young lady then wonders who is inside her body, and where is she now? A short time later, the knights are already asking Sir Valhal what they should do, and he only asks if they are saying that their request for a handwritten letter from the 8th princess was rejected. The knight then says that yes, and they said that the poor health of the princesses did not allow her to even raise a feather, and the other knight says that this is a trick, so let the man not let himself be deceived. He says that they spent several days answering and are definitely stalling for time, and the other knight says that besides, he doesn't think that it was possible to become so weak as to be unable to write a single line, because how can a person who felt great before the war suddenly wither away? So he is sure that the girl is no longer alive. And the other knight then asks if there is no chance that the 8th princess is in the hands of Granois. And without information, it is difficult to say for sure. The commander-in-chief then thinks that this is true and they have no information. And another knight says that there is no news from most sources. And the only one who heard anything was in the small port of the Vishan River near the borders of the western region. Blonde then says that Granois' army captured several women from Roymond as prisoners of war. They are reportedly used as translators and servants, and one of the knights says that high-ranking officials in Granois seem to be hiding someone, and the commander-in-chief then realizes that this is most likely the heir to the royal family, after which he says that if only they could rescue those women, it is quite likely that the person who's hiding is also a woman. And it's even more likely that she is the supposed 8th princess and they wanted to give up the front line. and also to return the princess if they received a handwritten letter. And they were ready to sacrifice so much for the sake of a living heir to the royal family. However, Granois refused to meet them halfway and return the negotiations to their original state. And now someone tells Sir Valhal that he needs to make a decision, to which the man just frowns. Then he claims that he will decide by the end of the day, but when the knights want to object, then he says that they are free, and then they leave. And the commander-in-chief thinks a little and then looks out from his hiding spot. That evening the man wets his pen in ink and begins to write something. He understands that those who put the royal heiress into eternal sleep and violated her body by hanging, and they are also trying to take over the country using the lives of the royal family as a bargaining chip and have already deserved death at his hands. But the man then sighs and realizes that the likelihood that they really have the 8th princess in their hands is 0. And the man wonders if she has been reduced to such a pitiful state that she is not even able to write a letter. After which he gets angry, but hopes that their words about the hostage princess are nothing more than a lie. He then looks at the blue ribbon and realizes that it is an item that belongs to the 8th princess. He also thinks about Zelen B'Maha Meredith. And he understands that for the first time he was able to see her normally 2 years ago, when the girl arrived at the coming-of-age ceremony. The man then understood that he had not been in the capital for a long time, and thought that the 8th princess's coming-of-age ceremony would take place today. He understood that the last time the 5th princess invited him to a formal dinner, in order to ask for the protection of the young 10th and 11th princes from the oppression of the next king. And this he hears every time he finds himself in the capital. However, the man had never heard such a request from the 8th princess, and moreover, he had never had the opportunity to see her in principle, or better yet, that she ran away without giving such an opportunity, and it seems that the girl was running away from him. Being a member of the queen's faction, he had many chances to cross paths with her, but she always ruined his plans to meet. Even when he tried to greet her from afar, the princess quickly disappeared from view. And the man understands that if you think like that, it's not very pleasant. But he didn't even try to pursue her, but she still ran away, so he doesn't understand how it could be, and besides, he never saw her in the center of the hall, so today she must also be hiding somewhere around the corner. But he understands that today the 8th princess is the main person of the evening, so this time she cannot be avoided greeting her. And he is also interested in what facial expression she will make. And the man, then looking at his watch, realizes that it seems the 2nd princess is delayed. The man has a habit of checking the time while he waits, and now he thinks that he will have to wait a bit outside the banquet hall. However, then he sees someone running up the stairs and wonders if it is the 8th princess. The man, looking at her, understands that the girl has such a pure and innocent face, and based on what he heard, she is an ordinary, quiet girl who does not like noisy parties. And after all, she is like a bird locked in a cage, believing that life is limited by the walls of the palace. But her gaze was fixed on him as she ran away and was filled with denial of the fact of imminent and inevitable death, because the girl was not going to give up, and despair was mixed with her hidden desire to live. And also the gaze, as if directed at the enemy, was like that of the last soldier. Therefore, the man thought that it turned out that the girl saw him as her worst enemy. And at this time, the 2nd princess approached him and asked what he was thinking about. The man then shuddered a little and asked if it was Her Highness Damiella. The girl then claimed that she was a little late and chatted with Libenzi and then said that they should go. And a little time later, someone already reported that Her Highness and Damiella had arrived B'Maha Meredith and Sir Valhal of the Lumares family. The guests immediately began to greet Her Highness, and the man understood that it felt like she was the main woman of the evening. But, however, attention has always been a part of her world, after all. After all, she is the closest blood relative of the next king and the lady of the commander-in-chief of the Ronheim army. The woman now turns to the commander-in-chief and asks if he will bring her something to drink, to which he agrees. And a little time later, he already gives her a glass. Well, the girl then claims that she needs to go to Lynn Bessie because she forgot to tell her something, and the man then bows and then agrees. Well, the girl then only went to her sister and greeted her with the taking. The knight then told the master that he thought he would want to stay a little longer with the 2nd princess. He also claimed that the attention of women would be drawn to him if she was not around, and the commander-in-chief said that he accompanied her for the evening and shared the first drink, so everything was in order. However, the knight then says that they have such a good relationship, So why is he behaving this way? But the man only claims that they are officially engaged, and the closer they are, the more active the rumors will spread. However, the knight then thought, what else should he say? After which he asked whether the man had seen her third princess. But she is as beautiful as they say. But the commander-in-chief answered that she had not, and when the knight continued to speak, he only said that he was tired, after which he asked if he could leave. After that, the commander-in-chief went outside and just sighed. He then thought about political marriage. The man understood that there was no connection between them either at the level of emotions or at the level of communication, and this marriage is just a way to lure Rowenheim to his side. He also understood that there was nothing between them and thought whether it was right to insist on marriage when none of them wanted it, and then he asked whether this choice would only weigh on him. The man understood that the fact that the main figure of the evening was the 8th princess, and she remained in the shadows, was therefore too confusing for him. Well, then he heard the door opening and realized that he needed to hide. Then the main character went out into the street, and the man wondered in shock if this was really the 8th princess. And just think that she would be hiding at her own coming-of-age ceremony. Zelane then only looked around, and the man thought that she should either greet the guests or sit in her place. The young lady then, making sure that no one was there, just sighed, and the man thought how she got out in the first place, and more importantly, why. However, then he heard that the girl was going somewhere, and when I looked, I saw that she was heading into the garden. However, the man thought it was not safe for the royal to walk around unattended. After which he headed towards her and understood that this was the path that led to the garden, and the garden was a popular place for secret meetings, so she could be in a hurry to meet someone. And they say that she doesn't like communication, but apparently this information is unreliable, after which the commander-in-chief goes after her. But then he sees that the young lady was just heading towards the fountain, and the girl then wets her hands and then says that the water is cold. Well, then she just smiles, and after that she steps into the fountain. The man just turns away from this and seems a little embarrassed when he hears the water splashing. He sees that the girl is wetting her feet in the fountain, but he understands that the more he looks at her, the more he does not understand. Did it seem to him that the princess was in despair? But when he looked at her, he saw that the girl was completely crying, after which he decided to approach her. Despite the young lady, he seemed to sympathize with her. The main character was crying at this time, and the commander-in-chief was watching her. But then he decided to go back around the corner, and the commander-in-chief then wondered how he dared to think so. After all, everything and everyone in this place is rotten through and through, but not her. When her lady finished crying, she climbed out of the fountain and understood that she needed to return. However, there was no one in the place where the commander had recently stood, and the man then only understood that this time it was not the princess who was running away, but he. The commander-in-chief understood that he needed to stop thinking about it, but then he heard someone sneaking, and when he returned, he saw that it was a young lady. Hey, the girl then thought that she needed to return as soon as possible, but then she heard the iron ringing, and when the young lady turned around, she saw a man there with a helmet on his head, who said that it looked like the hem of her dress was wet. It was the commander-in-chief, but the young lady didn't know it was him, after which she asked who he was and told him to call himself. However, when the man hesitated a little, then she immediately turned around and ran away, but when the young lady did so, then the man finally took off his helmet and understood that she had run away despite the fact that she saw his face. And that means it's not just one thing, because the girl basically avoids people. And this eternal readiness to escape, as if the girl understands that today she is here and tomorrow she may disappear. And then the man realizes that the look of the 8th princess haunts him. He doesn't know why, but he may sympathize with her. However, he also cannot not feel anything, and he feels anger seeing this look, and now the man is thinking, why the hell is this? And maybe because she ran away like crazy, or because she shed tears, or because of her uncertainty in a world where everything has already been decided, such as his wedding with the 2nd princess. After which he looks down and realizes that people said that the 8th princess was unremarkable, but this is not true. However, she cannot be called nobility. It's funny. But the girl's appearance gave the impression of a wild animal running in fear, but at the same time not lacking in tenacity, after which the man grinds against one of the pillars and drops his helmet, and then he sighs heavily. Now he is already sitting in his office and thinking about Princess Zelane. He understands that if the 8th princess is really in the hands of Granois, then her life will end the moment they attack. And as soon as they hear about the advance of their army, they will put an end to it. And this bird has also been unwell for the last few days, as if it understands what is happening around. After which he knocks on the table and thereby attracts the bird's attention. Then he shows her to fly up to him, and the girl does so. The man then gently pulls the ribbon and asks if she knows why Roymond's flag is yellow, and when the bird makes a small sound. The man claims that yellow is the color of Meredith's royal family, and this is the founding dynasty, which changed its position 3 times but preserved its lineage. The history of the family goes back about 600 years. To influence anything, but she is still the princess of the Meredith clan. And the girl thinks how painful it is to remember the meaning of the flag now, possibly being a prisoner of the enemy. And after all, she cannot even help the army of her country as the heiress of the royal family. The commander-in-chief, at this time, looks out from behind the tent and says that lately he has been thinking about the meaning of the yellow color in the flags of the royal family of Meredith. The main character then realizes that this is a trace of gold-colored blood, and the legend says that the man in whose veins flows golden blood let it flow on these lands, thereby protecting them. And they said that the blood of this man enriches the land where it is shed and also saves them from drought, prevents diseases, and protects lives, so the man with golden blood wished these lands prosperity. And the main character thinks that those who wanted his blood started a war in order to appropriate his powers only for themselves. Human blood polluted the earth and water, from which animals began to plunge into eternal sleep. The power of a person with golden blood could resurrect, but it was not possible to stop the war, and at that moment help came from 2 people. The first was a man from the mountains, and the second was a woman from the plains. They took the man with golden blood and fled, roaming the plains and mountains. This trio saved nature and the people living in those places. The main character still doesn't remember exactly who was born from whom, but she heard that the child of a man with golden blood was the first of Meredith's family. However, the flowering and life did not last long because of the man with golden blood who spread it throughout the country, and she lived near the Cherry River and also claimed that she wanted to return to where the river originates and flows through the lands of Roymond. Having arrived, she finally shed blood into its channel and then plunged into eternal sleep. But before that, she signed a contract with a man from the mountains and a woman from the plains, asking them to protect the child of golden blood as her own blood protects these lands. The main character then realizes that they have received the power to protect him and declare him king of the lands as promised. And finally, returning to the sources of the Cherry River, she shed her blood and the royal family into it, as well as the heirs who united these lands, bound for eternity and sharing a common destiny. The main character understands that this is the legend of Meredith's golden blood, and because of her devotion to the royal family, this narrative fits perfectly in her head. But behind this legend lies the truth, because this land will prosper only when blood is shed. The royal family justified their atrocities in the Dark Ages with one phrase. The royal family used heirs as relatives, and the history of the kingdom is full of civil wars. And all because of this stupid fairy tale about golden blood. The girl doesn't know whether this man's blood really made these lands bloom. Well, now, after so many immersions in eternal sleep, it is obvious that this legend is just a fake. And the golden color of the flag was taken from the legend of golden blood that was originally shed to protect people. And yet the young lady cannot hate the flower of her country, Roymond. The man then claims that the Meredith dynasty is now under threat of extermination, and so many heirs of the family have already been found dead. And now, perhaps the first living heir, the 8th princess, appears. After which he turns to the bird and asks what she is thinking, and when the young lady drips a little on his finger, then he says that it means she thinks it's worth abandoning the 8th princess, who could be the only heir and save Roymond. But after that he gets a little angry and asks whether it is worth trying to pull the princess out of the clutches of the enemy while betraying the lives of the people who live in the territory where the war is now. And the main character then barely holds back her tears and realizes that her existence has become a hindrance. And what's so special about this legend, because she's not even capable of anything. The girl understands that it's funny that her life is equivalent to the life of the entire country. And the man claims that without the heir to the royal family, the armies of the country will not be able to unite, and civil wars will break out in the kingdom again. They are bound by a contract with the ruling family, and their trust among themselves is barely perceptible, even if they manage to retake the country. Then they will begin to conflict with each other on the banks of the Cherry River, and if they freeze their actions for 40 days for the sake of the 8th princess, either victory or defeat will be in the hands of Granwa, and if the battle drags on and the Western army is exhausted, they will not last long. The man is then silent for a while and then sighs, and the young lady then jumps on his shoulder. She worries about the emperor and understands that for the good of her country she can only make one choice. Then the commander-in-chief falls asleep, but when he does this, he feels like someone who is stroking his head. When he opens his eyes, he asks if it is the princess, and the girl then turns to Sir Valhal and says that it must be very difficult for him, and she asks for forgiveness. But he says that everything is not so. But the young lady asks Togo to hold out a little longer for the good of this country. She says with tears in her eyes that because everything is fine with her. The man then extends his hand, but then he opens his eyes and realizes that it was just a dream. When he looks back at himself, he wonders if he is really wrapped in a blanket. And when he heard someone rustling in the blanket, he wonders who is there. When he opens the blanket, he sees that it is a bird, and then he hugs it. The next morning, the man is already near the stream. He is washing himself. But then Zeline remembers Bamahamerdith wonders what was hidden behind the tears that she shed while standing in the fountain that day, and whether the girl laughed at her plight or paid tribute to the life to which she barely clings. And what does she want so badly now, when both her and the life of the whole state lies in his hands? The man then walks into the stream and wonders what the young lady was thinking about then. However, then it's as if his heart is stabbing and the man grabs him. However, then he hears his bird. And when she sits on his shoulder, the man asks how she found him. But after that, he looks at Roimon's ribbon in her hands. He also tells the birds to return because the war with Granwa is still far from over, and he has not yet decided. However, the main character then only waves her head as if telling him not to do that. And the man then only mumbles what she is talking about, and whether the bird wants to put Roimon's victory above the life of the princess. After which, the young lady just nods, and the man remembers how the girl with tears in her eyes in his dream claimed that she was fine. And then he clenches his teeth and says that the bird dared to cross the line. He also asks if she wants him to leave the girl and choose Roimond, and she doesn't know anything because it's not that simple. After which, he begins to get more and more angry, and screams whether the bird wants him to save thousands of people instead of the only princess. But future civil wars will take even more lives than those they are willing to sacrifice. And then he screams, "Does she really think this is all a joke?" After this, the man breathes heavily, and the bird then only angrily wonders whether he thinks it's easy for her and why he's angry because what's wrong with him. The young lady understands that this is about her life, which she tried so desperately to save, and she does not intentionally throw it away. But the guy knows that Roimond should choose. So let him rejoice at her decision and be happy that he can save the lives of his soldiers, because only he understands her. The main character then flaps her wings and says that this way she will be smaller. And the man then looks at the bird and realizes that he has a feeling just like that day when everyone was happy. And as if this bird were Roimond, the man then remembers the eyes of the sky. After which he takes the bird in his hands and enthusiastically says that he knows a way to save everyone. A little later that morning, the knights enter the commander's tent and say that they have arrived. The commander-in-chief then only nods and then says that they will not move the front line. And the knights are then a little surprised, and one of them then says that it means Sir will give them the 8th princess. But the man then waves his head and says that this is also not part of their plans. The knights then ask what he is talking about. The man reveals the map and claims that it will take a long time for help to reach Granwa's troops. So time is against them, and hence the 8th princess, who they have secretly kept captive all this time, is their only chance of survival. Does he then say that this is true and changes the rules of the game in the struggle for the central region? And the brunette then claims that a truce has not yet been established between them. But the man then asks how Grana will react if a people's militia begins now. One of the knights then says that since they will be attacked by the enemy, a ton will harm the 8th princess, assuming that they really have her. The brunette then asks what if they are disingenuous, and the knight says that it means they will understand that their feint did not work and will let him go. And the commander-in-chief says that this is true, because if they retreat, they will not pursue them, because they only need to make sure that the princess is in their hands. But then another one of the knights says that if she is still a prisoner of Gron's army, then what then? And Sir Luke then claims that the militia was formed by Roimond's people on their own initiative, so they will not touch the princess until they find out whether they are involved in this, and to negotiate with them the princess must be alive. Brarunet then says that this is true for them, in which case they will conduct an investigation to find out whether they provoked the militia attack. And at this moment they must pick up the princess in time before they have time to comprehend the situation. But one of the knights then asks if they come under attack, they will think about transferring the princess to another place. And the other knight nods and then says that this is true, because they don't even know where exactly they are keeping her, so it will be difficult to get to her highness. And the man then asks what if several simultaneous raids take place, after which he points at the map and says that this will be a guerrilla war. The knights are then a little shocked and ask if he is talking about guerrilla warfare, but the commander-in-chief says that yes, even if the civilian militia under their leadership organizes a surprise attack in different regions, then the people responsible for keeping the princess captive will raise the alarm and urgently request reinforcements. One of the knights then says that this behavior cannot fail to catch the eye, and the brunette then claims that he will ask the heads of the rebel detachments to blow smoke if he notices anything suspicious. The main character then realizes that they are using smoke, and Sir Luke then asks if they will use smoke from the fire, because if so, then they need a messenger who will convey the information that he sees. But the army Granois can already transfer Her Highness to another place, or even plunge her into eternal sleep. The commander-in-chief then says that this is true and the option with a messenger will take too much time. However, they do have the eyes of the sky. The knights are then a little surprised and begin to whisper among themselves. One of them asks if the commander is talking about the rumor that the bird is from Yera Valhalla, sees and hears everything that happens in the camp. Another knight then says that this is just a rumor that they spread to destroy the morale of their opponents, and it was in those days when they began to discuss the fact that Sir often talks to the bird. The main character even twitches from this, and the commander then only strokes her and says that after all, they use her eyes. After which he looks at the bird, and then claims that their enemy does not know what their messenger bird is capable of, after which he screams to immediately begin the operation to save the 8th princess. A short time later, the man is about to hit one of the torches with a hammer and claims that it is a salt torch. And after he breaks it, a hot scarlet flame immediately begins, and the main character thinks how beautiful it is. Looking at the torch, the girl thinks that this is a most precious object that is not used every day even in the castle, and she has only seen such things in books, and now for the first time in her life she is seeing their flames live. The young lady understands that this is completely different from the flame that she usually saw, and this color is so alluring. However, the man then moves the bird back a little and tells it not to get too close, after which he opens a bag of sand and extinguishes the flame, and also says that it can easily catch fire. The young lady looking at this thinks that he extinguished it so quickly, but the man then tells her to calm down because her life directly depends on it. He also says that when the bird sees this flame, let it remember well the place of the fire and return to it. After all, he will already be on the way. The young lady then waves her head in agreement, and the man then tells her to remember that they attack anything flying in their direction in the dark. Therefore, before flying close, let her scream well and they will understand that it is her. Well, then he just turns around and says that, however, screaming is her strong point, so there's no need to worry about it. The young lady then thinks what he said and understands that it is because they people do not even understand what she is telling them. The commander-in-chief then claims that he will be second and the jockey will ride in front of him. So let her fly to the second line, but however there may be some changes so that, in order to recognize him in the crowd, let the bird focus on the ribbon that he tied to the cough, because it looks like the one he gave her. The man also claims that the bird is a diurnal predator, but the signal can occur at any time, so there is a possibility that they will be difficult to find. The main character then only makes a sound and flaps her wings as a sign of agreement, and the man then claims that she has a key role in this operation, and if she succeeds, then they will be able to finally throw Granois out of the Central Territories. And the young lady then understands that in this mission, her body and her life are at stake. Well, not only hers, but also the lives of several thousand soldiers. And even the commander-in-chief may lose his life in this battle. That same evening, the knights ask the commander-in-chief if he is also participating in the battle. And when he answers that yes, they say that it is too risky. The other knight then asks to send them in his place. However, the man raises his hand as if telling them not to worry. Then he claims that in the battle for the Black Protective Wall he was in the forefront and even opened the gates, and if he, the commander-in-chief, does not take the initiative, he will also take the risk in his place. Sir Luke then turns to the commander-in-chief and says that he is not lowering his skills, but at night, even generals can fall at the hands of a common soldier. Friend and his knights also say that, moreover, they will be in the very center of enemy territory. The new commander-in-chief then only says that the issue is resolved and they are all free, and the young lady thinks that the backlash was stronger than expected. The knight then screams whatever one may say, and the man cannot participate, and he asks him to send another soldier. Then each of them says that he will go. Sir Luke says that he is also at the disposal of the commander-in-chief, and asks if he doesn't trust them, but he says that this is true and they are free. The knight then tells the commander-in-chief that this is not a competition, but a real war, and if at least one poisoned arrow hits him, or he is wounded in a vital point, then everything will be over. Even when the man goes to bed, the knight does not give him peace and says that this is impossible because he really cannot participate. And, on the next idea, the knight also pesters the commander-in-chief, but he only sticks his sword into the ground. Then he says that if he continues to chat, he will be left without a head and he won't even look at friendship. But the knight then only looks resentfully at the commander-in-chief, and the main character thinks that this is amazing, and Sir Luke goes to the last. Valhal then only sighs heavily, and the main game doesn't think about what they should do if he really dies. She understands that the knights will be very upset, and even she will not be able to help them. But then the girl twitches and realizes that she will never allow this to happen. After all, losing the commander-in-chief at a time when there is not a single heir to the royal family is an unaffordable luxury, and having a leader is essential, otherwise the country will turn into ruins, and the girl thinks that he can just use others as his shield and survive like nobles do. But she doesn't understand why he is risking his life like it's something insignificant. Now the commander-in-chief says that there will be no changes, and he will be there personally. But then the knight almost cries, and the brunette tells him to stop being indignant and reconcile himself already. Home, the heroine understands that pride is important, but life is priceless. And after this mission, she will join Sir Luke's side and will dissuade him from any dangerous exits. But the girl then also thinks what will happen to her after this operation. Will she be able to return to her body? A short time later, she is nervously gnawing on the paper, and one of the knights asks why the bird behaves this way and whether he should stop it. However, the commander-in-chief tells him to leave her like that and let her destroy confidential documents. The young lady thinks that she is worried because a group of soldiers will attack Granwa's troops, and she is participating in the operation. The commander-in-chief then asks what is going on with the special unit, and he claims that they are pretending to be sentries on the northern border of the camp, and he did not inform anyone below the commanders since the operation is extremely secret, and the commander-in-chief then says that this is an excellent job and then orders the knight to stand outside. And then he calls the bird to him, puts the document in front of it, and tells it to check everything again. The young lady realizes that she has already seen this map indicating the trajectory of the attack 1,000 times, and now she can already tell that the first detachment is in the south, the second in the east, the third in the north, and the fourth in the west. The commander-in-chief then pets the bird and says that it needs to rise very high to see the big picture and guide them on the right path, after which the man remembers the 8th princess and how she constantly ran away, after which he says that he is not sure whether the bird is aware, but he is convinced that the person they want to rescue is still alive. The main character then understands that we are talking about her but thinks, why is he sure that she is alive? After all, the man doesn't even know her, and they have never met. However, the commander then says that he trusts the bird. Then he kisses the ribbon on her leg and wishes her luck. Half an hour before the start of the offensive, he is already leaving the tent, and when he is already preparing to release the bird, he says that they will see each other again. The young lady doesn't know what he meant by trusting her, but apparently he trusted her completely. The girl realizes that now she bears a great responsibility, and then thinks that she also believes in Valhal and asks when all this will end, so that they both are alive. At this time the operation begins. People attack the Granwa camp, and the young lady sees all these battles. However, suddenly she sees a red fire in the forest and realizes that it is true, and she really survived. The girl realizes that she survived in the enemy camp, after which she immediately turns around and understands that she needs to inform Valhal about this. The girl understands that thousands of lives depend on her actions, and now she is a soldier just like them, so she must fulfill her mission. Then the young lady sees soldiers racing on horses and realizes that this is Royman's army. She thinks she has found them, and now she needs to find Valhal. However, suddenly she flies up to one horse, after which she gets scared and realizes that at that moment she felt that she would fly into pieces if she crashed into him, and the girls even wanted to run. However, then she saw the gold ribbon on his helmet, after which she screamed loudly and she understood that she would not escape. The commander-in-chief then saw the bird, after which he began to rise with the horse right as he walked, and the young lady was shocked and wondered what he was doing, and also whether he had gone crazy because he jumped up at full speed. However, then the commander-in-chief still caught her and then said that this was an excellent job. The young lady then realized that Valhal was able to, but then she realized that she needed to quickly point to the camp that the 4th squad was attacking, and the young lady showed where they needed to go. After which Valhal shouts that they are heading south, and then unties the ribbon on his helmet and gives it to the young lady and also tells her to return to base. The commander-in-chief also claims that he will return soon and then releases the bird. And the main character understands that he must return. At this time, the man is cutting the fabric of one of the tents, and when he sees that there are 2 girls inside and a princess lying on the bed, he immediately takes off his cape and wraps it around the princess. The commander-in-chief understands that he needs to get out of there and then immediately runs out of the tent. And then he gets on his horse and says that they are returning. When the army heads towards the camp, the enemies shoot and scream that they need to stop the army. One of the knights then informs the commander that they are being attacked. The commander-in-chief then tells him to blow the trumpet, and the knight then uses the trumpet to announce that the operation was successful and the troops need to retreat. The man, holding the princess in his hands, understands that it does not seem that she offered resistance even when she was in the clutches of the enemy, and he doesn't even know whether she has lost her mind or is still sleeping. But when he looks at her, he wonders if she's really sleeping. And although the girl is now in his arms, the commander-in-chief has the feeling that she will disappear if he just turns away for a moment, as if she always ran away as soon as she saw him. And then Valhal, with a smile on his face, realized that he had finally caught her. However, then he is a little surprised and thinks how irresponsible this is, and how dare he put it that way. This operation is not yet completed, and they need to get to the camp safe and sound where they are waiting. A short time later, he already enters the gates of the camp, and the knights, seeing their commander-in-chief together with the princess, are very surprised. Valhal then only tells the 1st and 2nd squad to check the special squad and send the wounded to the doctor's ward. The knights immediately agree and do so, and the commander-in-chief then orders the 4th detachment to take Her Highness the Princess and the prisoners to the recreation area, and then let them make sure that the messenger bird has returned safe and sound. The man also addresses the 1st squad, and he tells them to prevent the soldiers from unrest and also reveal the news that the princess has returned until he orders otherwise. And finally, let the 3rd detachment go with him, to which Sir Luke agrees and says that he has prepared everything, after which they head to the tent. And the knight reports that this is the chamber he asked for and it does not stand out in any way, so it is safe there. The commander-in-chief then says that it's good, and they can ask a little later about the state of affairs and when the man puts the girl on the bed. Then the knight, seeing her face, is surprised and says that this is really a princess. The young lady just lies unconscious on the bed,